I'm actually really nervous to do this video. This isn't very much something that I do. It's not really who I am to be talking about something in such detail and length like I'm about to. I'm not someone who... I'm very much someone who's an introvert. I'm very much someone who's inward focused, and I'm very shy and unable to say what I mean to, and say the things I want to, and I have a lot of difficulty being able to make very coherent thoughts and clear sentences. I fumble with my words a lot, and this is just who I am. This isn't anything I can do. This isn't anything I can change. This is just who I am, and that's okay. But I am going to step out of my comfort zone, as they say. I am going to go against my nature in a way to talk about what I'm going to talk about right now. It's because this is something that means so much to me. It affects me in so many ways, more than one. It has shaped me into who I am today. And it's something that I just want to be able to talk about and share with people. To be able to review, really. And so, all I ask is that if you're watching this, to just remember that I'm very bad at communicating and very bad at talking, especially for the amount of time I expect this to go. So, all I ask is that you please be patient with me. Now, anything I could say about this game that I'm about to talk about would not be enough. It's just... there's just so much to talk about with this game. There really... you can't even really sum it up in just a few words. It really hits home and has a lot of stuff to discuss. And I could be here for hours, but I'm going to try not to be. So, anything I am going to be talking about probably will not be enough. There's just so much to cover. And I do want to remind everyone that everything in this video is just my opinion. You can agree, disagree, you can do whatever you want. I'm just sharing this because I want to. And if you want to discuss it or respond or anything in the comments, just please be civil and kind and respectful. And just be cool, you know? Let's just discuss this and talk about why this is so great and what it means, and just please be courteous if you do wish to respond to this in any way. And I do want to make a quick disclaimer that this reviewing style that I'm going to be doing, what's so-called the talking head of sitting and recording yourself talking while recording, and that this review style belongs to someone named Archengeia, who's my favorite reviewer on YouTube. He is such a good reviewer. He talks about games in depth for hours, and he's, I don't know, he's the man. He's so good at reviewing things, and hearing his review style made me realize that I needed to do that for this game, just because of how much it means to me, and I think it deserves a review like this. Let me just put it that way. And so I'm stepping out of my usual behavior and comfort zone to review this in depth. And it's something I've always wished to do, and that's all I ask, is that you please be patient and listen and be open. And usually a lot of people don't use the word best to describe things. You know, usually when someone will talk about like a book or a movie or game or anything really, and they'll be like, "Oh, that thing's the best," and they'll say it as a compliment, but they're exaggerating because, you know, we're human. And usually when they do that, they mean, yeah, it's great, but it's probably not the greatest thing ever. You know, maybe they do, I don't know, but usually best is exaggerated in a way. And I'm not really someone who uses the word best to describe things. When I describe something as the best, I mean, no, really, this thing is the best. It is the greatest thing that anything could ever be. And just a reminder, everything I'm about to say is pure opinion. Don't take it as concrete truth or anything, or invalidation of your opinion, because your opinion matters just as much as mine does. I am simply sharing my thoughts through a video, and that's all I want to do. So it is my opinion when I say that Tales of Symphonia is the greatest story ever written. And I mean that sincerely. I really, really do. This is one of the deepest stories I have ever witnessed. One of the stories that has changed my life in so many different ways, and is easily the most influential work of fiction I've ever experienced. And I want to remind everyone, before I dive into this, that if you have even the slightest interest of playing this, if you have any interest at all or any ability to, please shut off this video and go play it. Seriously, just get it off the internet and order it off Amazon or whatever, get a copy, even watch the animation, the OVA series. It misses a lot of details, but it's still really good. Watch cutscenes on YouTube, there's the HD remake coming out in about a year or so get that. I mean, try to get your hands on this thing if you really are interested in it. Please, I implore you. If you don't want to, that's fine. And if you're still watching this video after my telling you that, I assume that you either don't care, which is fine. I just said if you don't really care about the game, that's fine, and you just want to hear it. That you don't really play video games, or just can't play it because you don't have the right console, or have an inability to get it, or whatever. That you want to hear me go on for a bit to see if you actually want to pick up this game or not. And hearing my opinion on it will let you know. Or that you already have played it. In which case, great, you know? So, when I'm reviewing this, I'm doing Archengeia's thing, like I said, of splitting all of the details of the game into a spoiler section and a non-spoiler section. And I'm going to share the stuff that doesn't spoil the story and everything first, so that way, if you're watching this, you can choose to avoid all the spoilers, and I will give you a warning ahead of time. So that way you can shut off the video or anything if you want to avoid them. If not, great. I'm here to talk about that. Alright, so let's dive right in. So first, let's start off with non-spoiler stuff, like the game stuff. So, the Tales series has a very interesting set of combat mechanics. It's very much unlike any JRPG I've ever seen, and the series continues it and builds upon it with each game. So, what it's called is the linear motion battle system, where basically you're on a 2D thing, and you're over here, and the enemies are over here. Hold on, give me a moment. And you charge, and you can only move left or right in relation to the enemies. And you fight them and attack and yada yada. Alright. So they've been improving upon that with each game. The Tales of Fantasia, the first one, was just, here's a 2D thing, go nuts. And then, I kept building upon that with each game, and when they hit Symphonia, they first tried to bring that into a 3D environment. And, the system they call that is the flex range linear motion battle system. I know I'm talking technobabble, but just bear with me here. So, instead of just moving left and right like this, instead the entire battle takes place in a circle, right? You're kind of like here, and then the enemies are here. And what's happening is you and your 3 other allies, because there's 4 people in each battle, and you're controlling one, you are constantly locked on to one person right here, and you can only move left or right in relation to them. You can change that lock anytime you want by holding R and then switching around all the different enemies, and then you'll be moving left and right in relation to this guy, so that instead of just moving left and right, like I said earlier, you're instead moving like this, you fight him, change your lock, you're over here, then you're going like that, and then you change it over here, and you're going like this. So everything moves in a 3D circle, but it still controls in 2 dimensions. And it's really cool. It's, I don't know, it's really cool. I don't have any other words. It's just cool, you know? The closest thing I can even think of that comes remotely close to the battle system is Super Smash Brothers, and that's because the entire game is the entire battle system is controlled with your control stick and about 3 buttons, and the R button to change blocks. That's about it. And Y to bring up the menu. But your regular attacks are on the A button, and you do different attacks based on whichever direction you're holding, like Smash. And then you can map all of your special attacks to the B button, which activate depending on which direction you hold while pressing B, like Smash. And you block with the X button, so you block incoming attacks. And, again, moving left and right, just like Smash. You'll see that I keep comparing it to that. It's because there really isn't anything else to compare it to. It's such a unique combat style. I don't really have any other words for it. And it creates a really unique and interesting way of playing out battles, because everything goes by in about 30 seconds to a minute. Oh jeez. And the battles, the random encounters anyways, are fast-paced. The boss battles are really hard and challenging, and it's all fast-paced, high energy, and I don't know, it's just cool. I wish I had more words to describe this. I really don't. Just look it up online. Look it up on YouTube. Watch the footage of the battle system. It looks so cool, and how you can chain all your different special attacks together, and there's a whole bunch of different combinations, but I'd rather not get into that. So, alongside the combat, aside from what I just described, and being able to bring up your menu and determine which special attacks you equip, and what your armor is, and what items you could use on the spot. And if you use an item, you have a 2-second delay until you can use another one, which is a really good balance. You also have a thing called a unison attack. And what happens is, when you are in battle and you're attacking and fighting, you, I don't even know what that was, by the way, but you attack. You're fighting, and then you decide, hey, I'm going to use the unison attack now. So there's a giant bar right above the status of all your allies, and actually it'd be, you guys would probably be this corner. You just got your 4 characters, and then you got the unison gauge bar right here. And when it fills, you can use a unison attack, and you can have each of your 4 party members use a different special attack of theirs. And depending on the right combination, you can have 2 combine their attacks to create something very powerful. And it's a really cool mechanic in terms of being able to link combos against enemies, use all your tech attacks, create huge combos with that, and then finish it off with a unison attack with everyone doing their combos, and then you get the 2-person co-op attack, which is very powerful. It's the cool factor, It's like, a lot of it's the overlimit thing, like in Final Fantasy. Overlimit. The overdrive, the limit break. I'm just messing up today. It's that thing. It's cool. It's just a superpowered attack that looks awesome. And that's really all there is to it. At the end of every battle, you get points called grade points, which at the end of the game, when you finish it all, you can New Game Plus using all the grade points you use to buy different bonuses. So, for example, you could spend a whole bunch to carry over all your money, carry over all your titles, which I'll get into in a bit, carry over all your monster data, items data, all your counters, like your game time and everything, and carry over specific stuff like save points you created or whatnot. And then you can affect different things, like you get 2 times the experience total overall, or you get 10 times, which makes the game ridiculously easy, or you can create half experience, so everything is incredibly difficult. So it really offers a lot of different options in terms of how you play the game and how you approach it. And it's very good to replay the game, because then it's not just like, okay, I've done it like 8 times, now I have to do the exact same thing. And instead you could be like, alright, I'm gonna do half difficulty on the hardest half EXP on the hardest difficulty, and no titles, no money, no nothing, and use all my no carrying over the X skills, which I'll get into in a minute. And I'm gonna use all the starting equipment, so no equipment at all. That would be a very hard time. So, let's see what we got here. Cooking. Alright, so this is actually really hilarious. I had my friends hang with me one time, and we were playing this together, and he couldn't get over the cooking thing. It's actually really hilarious when you think about it, but bear with me. It's what happens is, at the end of every battle, you have the chance to cook a meal, or cook something. There'll be tons of different meals you could choose from that have different effects, like, you could cook curry, which will heal a bunch of health, or you could cook steak, which will heal a whole bunch, or cook... Why do I keep doing this? I was thinking of stir-fry, but I don't know. And you can cook... Well, the sandwiches are the one you start off with, so my roommate couldn't get over that. He's like, yeah, we made a sandwich! Don't worry, guys, just took care of this. So, at the end of every battle, it's you have to get different ingredients in order to make something, so the game has a very big system in terms of being able to buy ingredients and put stuff together. And then you choose a recipe, and then at the end of every battle you can press the X button, and then you'll heal all your allies because you cooked it, or you failed because you're an idiot. It's a really good mechanic in terms of... Well, see, the money drop rates in the game are actually a lot lower than you would be comfortable with, because the game likes to... It tries to make a point in lore and, well, in both gameplay and story, that the world is dying, and that it's very hard to get your hands on food around the place. And in order to do, well, and it's very hard to just get money and be able to buy things. So, the prices of things are a lot more expensive than you would like relative to the amount of money you make. So, a good way to heal yourself is to use the cooking mechanic, and to get different recipes and get people good at cooking things. I mean, in a way, it probably equals out to about the same amount of money, but in the end, it's actually a lot better in some ways of healing. And I really don't know what... Oh, there is one thing. Every time you get a new recipe, basically in every town, it's usually a town. Or a few times where it could be in a dungeon, but usually it's in a civilized area. There'll be, like, in one of the houses in one of the towns, there'll be an object that's out of place. Like, you know, there's, like, a port town, they've got fishing equipment and everything, and then you just see, like, a giant rubber duck in the corner of the room. And... This is beautiful. You run up to it, and then you press A, and that little cutscene starts up where it turns into smoke, and then this weirdo dude wearing a chef hat and this weird outfit carrying a giant pitchfork fork for lack of a better word, shows up and he's like, I am the mysterious gourmet, the Wonder Chef, and I will give you the ingredients for blah. And then you learn how to make a given dish, and then he's like, it requires these ingredients, here you go. Alright, see you later. And then disappears again, and you're just like, I don't know, it's just, it gets me every time. It's so awkward in a way. But that's about it for that. Let's see. Alright, the X skills. Okay, so this is a good example of gameplay and story integration, right? You've got basically the way everybody is so super powered in terms of everyone else. You know, a lot of RPGs don't really explain this, but the Tales series does. At least it tries to most times. It basically, there's a magic item, more or less, a technology. It's very kind of iffy on the details, but basically there's an artifact, a thing, called an X-Sphere, and when you equip the X-Sphere to yourself, it augments your combat capability and physical capabilities far beyond what they would be even if you trained for 4 decades without one. And so basically that's how everyone gets their power, and that's how you get stronger, because your X-Spheres get stronger with you. So a way that the game shows this is through the X-Gems and the X-Skills, where you basically have 4 slots to equip X-Gems with, and you have 4 levels of X-Gems, which can be put anywhere. It's not just 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can put like 4 level 4s or 4 level 1s, or any combination you want. So you equip, say, you're on Lloyd, right? And you equip a level 1 X-Sphere, X-Gem, and you have 4 options, which are Strong, Magic, I believe, Accurate, and I think Taunt is the 4th one. So you can choose one of those 4, and so let's just say you choose Strong. So then he's got an increased strength stat. And then you put in more, like a level 2 one, where you put in his personal thing that you can move faster on the map. And then you put in a level 4 one, where he can get an extra combo, and that's the level 3 one. Then a level 4 one, where you get an air combo, where you get 3 hits in the air instead of 2. And basically, this offers a lot of player customization, because you have 4 gems with 4 different skills, so you could do any combination of any of those gems, of any of those skills, and it offers just a lot of freedom in terms of how you want to build your characters and how you want them to level up, and a lot of different skills they have. And it's a really good mechanic. It reminds me a lot of Final Fantasy VI in that the relic thing. It kind of reminds me of that, in a way. So what can happen is, if you equip certain X skills, like I said, Strong and Personal, like, you can instead discover a compound X skill, which is basically an extra bonus that applies if you have, like, X and Y and Z equipped, and then you get A. What is it? A good example is, like, for Kratos, you can, I think Kratos gets this one. You can, equip it so he can attack up to 6 times regular attacks, but he can't link special attacks after the 4th hit. But if you equip certain X skills and then create a compound one, it is actually possible for him to do all 6 and then do his special attacks after. So there's things like that. There's very simple, well, not really simple, there's tons of combinations that you can make out of the X skills, and it's a really neat mechanic, and it offers a lot of player freedom. Strike and technical, okay. This is another thing that is important about the X skills. So to show that you're evolving based on the power of your X spheres, well, the characters are, anyways, and that the gems are what you equip to the X sphere to make it stronger. You, depending on the different type of the skills that I was just mentioning, you will either go into a strike type or a technical type. This is honestly very confusing. The game doesn't really explain this very well, but basically, I said with Lloyd, on the level 1 sphere, you equip Strong, right? A Strong is a strike-type skill. So you equip that, and then you put on his personal one, which is a... I think the personal is a strike-type again. I could be wrong, but you equip that, let's just say it is another strike-type. You equip that, and so now Lloyd is considered a strike-type character. Now, if you put on 2 more that were technical types, that just S and T types. So if you put on 2 that were T and 2 that were S, nothing would happen. But if you put on 3 that are S and 1 that is T, then he will still be considered a strike type. Now, I'm sure there's tons of numbers that go into this, and I'm not really concerned about that. So, when you equip that on Lloyd, he becomes a strike type, and as you're fighting... Yeah, I'm doing the thing again. Yeah, as you're fighting, you will learn new abilities and new special attacks based on what kind of type you are. So, effectively, every character has 2 sets of special attacks that they can learn, but you can only have 1 at a time. So, you can only be either a T or an S type. So, even if you carry over all of your skills with all of your tech attacks with New Game Plus, you'll still be either one of those types, unless you choose to unlearn them and become the other type. So, that also offers a lot of player customization. So basically, Lloyd's bad examples. Let's not focus on him. Let's do Genus. Alright, so the mage, right? So, if he's a tech type, a T type, he is, his spells will hit a wider area, and will hit multiple times, and basically hit as many enemies as possible for as many hits as possible, right? So, if he's an S type, instead, he will usually shoot out a laser or something. I've never had him be an S type. He'll, cast basically a spell that will attack a very tiny area for a lot of damage. So he'll shoot like a missile that'll decimate everything in the path, or shoot down a whole bunch of lightning from the sky. Thunder Arrow, I believe, is the spell for that. So basically it's the difference between either hit him with 1 big hit or a bunch of kind of medium hits in a wide area. So a lot of Genus's skills default to tech type, so usually if you don't try, then he's going to end up as a tech type anyways, but the different mechanic there, in terms of learning different tech skills, is a very good means of increasing replayability and allowing character growth. So with that said, let's move on to the AI strategy in combat. I know there's a huge list of stuff for combat. I'm sorry. This game is such an in-depth combat system. I'm sorry. So basically, you're only controlling one of your 4 party members on the field at a given time. So that means that you have to... The game gives you a way to map out the strategies of your allies. So if you go on the strategy screen, you can affect their attack method, their skill use method, and their movement method. So you could have characters be right up in the front lines, right up against enemies, or you could have them in the back casting magic, or you could have them staying in one position and not attacking and just guarding. You could have them be far away from enemies as possible. What else am I missing? So for movement, so for attacking, you could have them attack, like, the same enemy you're attacking, attack a further enemy, attacking a different one, attacking one that's targeting the ally with the lowest HP, things like that. There's tons of, I don't want to get into it, but there's tons of different options, right? And, so being able to know the differences in the strategies and being able to map out how your allies work and their AI, and the game gives you 3 shortcuts that you can change on the fly with, every time you pause the battle by hitting Y, and then bringing up the menu, you can press any of the 3 directional buttons on the D-pad, the 4th being just cancel orders, to something you either customize or they have pre-made ones. And that's a commands that you give to all 4, and they obey the pre-mapped strategy that you gave them. So I think that's really cool, and it saves a lot of time, and it offers a lot of different strategies in terms of battle. Titles. Okay, titles. This is actually a really good game mechanic. So usually games will offer alternate costumes or whatever to characters. In the Tales series, this is a series-wide thing. You can alter characters' stats in terms of how they level based on what title they have. So the starting title, you just have starting stats. You know, you'll level up with basically no extra bonuses added on. With, say, what's a good example? So say you equip like Lloyd's Drifting Swordsman, which you get pretty early on. It will increase his HP, strength, and I think accuracy by a little bit. So if you keep that equipped throughout the whole game, there's different numbers for each of the stats, and there's a list of all the different stats, and they're lit in green or red to tell you whether or not you'll be getting more points or less in each one. And basically, if you play the whole game with just that one title on him, he will level up with slightly more HP, strength, and accuracy than you would have otherwise. You can carry over the titles with New Game Plus, which is good, because they are worth it. That's also how you get all the extra costumes, by the way. All the extra costumes are equipable as titles. And you don't get any stat bonuses for them, which is a shame, but, you know, at least you get a laugh out of seeing, I don't know, Lloyd in a beach costume with scuba gear and flippers and a big tube, inflatable tube around him. So, basically the titles also give more replayability and more options for the player, which is good, because, you know, if you just play the game without even paying much attention to all these and just kind of just mess around with it and then that's it, you'll be leveling up pretty well. You'll be in a specific type, but the game basically makes it as if you don't really have to try to customize these things, but if you want to, the option is there. And I think that is very, very good, because giving options to the player is a good thing. So basically you could New Game Plus with your titles, and then equip the strongest titles on everyone, and then just plow through the game because you're leveling up in so many different stats and so many different... Basically, you're going to be more powerful than you would have been otherwise. I really don't have the words for that. It's pretty self-explanatory. Each character controls very differently. Like, Lloyd is a very fast attacker, very quick-moving, combos easily, and also has a lot of hard-hitting attacks, also depending on which tech or strike you are. And he's basically the easy character to play as. He's the easiest one to play as. Colette is sort of mid-range because she has chakrams, and she can throw them or just attack right up in the enemy's faces, and then she has a lot of powerful attacks. So I haven't had her BT type, so I don't know what her tech type skills are. And then Genus and Rain are the mages. So basically what I'm trying to say is every character controls differently and is thus more options to use, because you're controlling a different character in a different way with different skills and different effects and different everything. So there's a lot of options available to you in terms of how you go about combat. Now, that's enough about that. Let's go to world map travel. So, basically for most of the game you're going to be on foot, but if you explore the map, you can find these things called guidepost monuments, which are basically just giant rock slabs sitting in a corner of the map. And when you go up to it, you'll unlock something that's called long range mode for the area. So, when you're on long range mode... Oh, and this is another thing. There are no random encounters in the game. So if you're in the dungeon, you'll see an icon that represents an enemy, and if it touches you, you fight. So, it's the same on the world map. If you're in long-range mode, the enemies don't move unless you're moving, and you're moving slightly faster than they are. So, if you have long-range mode unlocked and you just don't want to deal with combat for a while, you can just pass by it and go into long-range mode and just walk to where you need to go. You can carry that over with New Game Plus, too, so if you can New Game Plus and for, like, up until you get the airship, you can basically just pass by random encounters at will on the world map. So for a while, you're either going to be walking around or on long-range mode, and, which, by the way, you're riding Lloyd's dog, but it's not really a dog, it's a, I don't know, the game explains it, it's in a side quest, but I don't want to spoil that, so basically you're riding a giant dog. Alright, so, you can also, in every town, there's something called the Cat's Exploration Team, which for the longest time you think are just these weird people dressed in pink cat costumes. And I'm not really going to spoil that. There's not really much of a surprise, but basically there are these people in pink cat costumes that are like, meow, we're the Cat's Exploration Team, and you can pay them a specific amount to either find those guideposts for you, get more map data, find treasure, or get monster data. I think that's all 4. I think that there's only 4. So if you don't feel like exploring the map and basically grinding, you don't really have to grind. This is optional. You can either pay them to do it, you'll encounter enemies as you're traveling, so you'll naturally do quite a bit of it anyways, or just go nuts on the world map and just explore every corner on there and just discover everything, I guess. So skits. Alright, so I've got a huge list, by the way. I don't know if I made that clear. I've got a huge list of bullet points to talk about. So skits are actually a really interesting thing. They're done in the Tales series. It's not just a thing in this game. You, basically when you're running around on the world map or anywhere, you'll see a little icon of the Z button in the corner and it'll say the title of the skit. And if you press Z, there'll be all these little boxes with the characters in them, and their mouths will be moving. It's not voice acted in this game, but they are in later ones. And you can learn their flavor, more or less. They not only help point you to where you need to go, but you also learn more about the characters. You see them get put in very silly situations. Basically, it's flavor. I don't really have any other way to say it. It's character development. You learn so much more from the characters from the skits than you would otherwise. It's optional. Again, you can skip it if you want. I would not recommend skipping them because some of them are actually really funny. They have that weird, cheesy Paper Mario humor, but they're actually pretty good. On the field, when you're running around in the world map, there are these big glowing spots, which are usually in a corner of the map, so you have to go a ways to find it. And then you'll encounter a field skit, where you're given an option of 2 replies to basically what the characters are saying. And depending on what you say, the characters will either like you more or not. You being Lloyd. So, usually, if you choose one that's friendly, they'll, be open and they'll like you more. But if you choose one that's usually not, they'll, I don't know, just not like you as much. Or just be neutral. Which gets me to my next point, the friendship scenes. So basically, in the game, every now and again you're given an option out of 2 options, like I said. This isn't just on the map. There are tons of them in the middle of cutscenes. And each option gives you a specific amount of points, more or less. There's scores, they are hidden from the player, and there's a lot of math that goes into it. Basically, the responses you give affect how much the characters like you. And so, like, for example, at the very beginning, there's one where you're told to stay in the classroom right in the opening scene, and then if you try to leave, you'll get an option of saying either it's research, and then get Colette to like you more, or okay, fine, and then Genus will like you more, but Colette will not like you as much. And then in that one, you get 2 different scenes, depending on which one you chose, but I don't want to spoil that. So, usually they will give you an extra scene. Well, not usually, but every now and again they'll give you an extra scene, depending on which one you choose, but mostly they are for affecting the characters' relationships values. So, I can't really say relationship, because it's not romantic, it's, I guess, platonic, but it's different. You have different relationships, not romantic, with them. Those, for 1 or 2 of the characters, it's implied, but I don't want to get into that. So, basically, if you choose a whole bunch of stuff, by the end of the game, whichever character has the highest score for you, the only way you can tell is there's a fortune teller in one of the cities that'll tell you, but they'll give vague answers. So basically, at one point you will have the option of choosing which character you want, and so say you get Colette, so you have Colette, and you get a whole bunch of extra scenes with her that affect her character. They'll show you more of who she is, and there's a lot more character development for just that one person that that you get the friendship values up for. So it's a really replay friendly thing again, because each time you can get a different character and see more of who they are that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. It's a really neat mechanic, and I really like it. So for the dungeons, like I said, there's no random encounters, and every dungeon looks and feels different. The game's art style really brings that out. And their game uses a thing called the Sorcerer's Ring, and each dungeon has a specific function for it. And basically the puzzles revolve around that function that you use it for. The standard is just a little ball of fire that doesn't even go that far at all. So, excuse me, my voice cracked there, whatever. So, each dungeon feels different, like the Martel Temple, which is the tutorial one, where you get the Sorcerer's Ring, is basically a damp, dark, very unexplored area. Well, it is explored, but it's filled with monsters, because it's, intro, and you're still learning the combat, and it's really short and basic. And then the Temple of Fire, which is, okay, maybe that's not the next one, but the one after, where there's basically a center room, and there's lava, and you move platforms and whatever. So basically, I'm doing a really bad job of trying to say what I mean to say, but basically every dungeon feels different, and every location feels different, and it's really, I don't know, it's just good game design, for the most part. There's some areas that, some of the dungeons can have puzzles that can just be, like, hair-pulling, because they're frustrating. If you have to look up a guide for some of the dungeons in the game, I hold no judgment, because I wrote on index cards. I have index cards I put in the game case, and every time I play through the game and I hit a specific dungeon that I have the solution written out for, I'm like, okay, let me just take out the index card, and okay, so I go there, do that, there, okay, I'm done. And then I play for a while, enjoy it, and I get to the next dungeon, and I'm like, alright, let's see, okay, thank you. So, if you have to look up for a guide for some of the dungeons in the game, I'd recommend it, at least. There are some that can be a little annoying. That's really it for dungeons. Every town looks and feels different, much like the dungeons. And you can I didn't say this before, but on the world map and in towns and dungeons, you can select which character icon you have for you moving around. And every now and again, it may give different dialogue with the townsfolk. Just every now and again. It's not very frequent, but you know, if you're into that kind of thing of going through effort just to get a few extra lines of dialogue, it's very good. Especially with one of the characters later on, but I can't really talk about him yet because I would be spoiling things. But if you played the game and you've heard about that, then you probably know who I'm talking about. The game does a very good job of making the towns feel alive. Like, every townsperson has at least, well, not at least, but every townsperson has more than one line of dialogue. Some only have one. And usually they're sharing info about their lives. Like, you'll hear a fisherman saying that his yield wasn't that good for the past few days and that he's hoping that'll get more, you know? Like, you see into these people's lives, even though they're so insignificant in terms of how the game plays. Basically, they have nothing to add to the game part of the game. They are just there. And you talk to them and you learn about them, and it's really rewarding in a way to have that flavor there. And all of the towns are designed there's a lot of different areas in certain towns that have no purpose other than to just add flavor, or just expand the town or the setting. My favorite example is in a town pretty early on called Palma Costa, where when you arrive there, you're in the market area where there's all these outdoor bazaars, and you see fruit and weapons laid out, and armor, and items lying around, and you see fish on racks, and fish nets, and none of them have anything to do with anything. You can't interact with them, you can't do anything. They're just there. And they don't add anything. Well, they add flavor, but you can't do anything with them. They are just decorations. They add flavor. And, okay, so they also show which shop is which, but that's they could have done that and just put a sign that said, like, weapon, armor, you know? But they went out of their way to design kiosks that are filled to the brim with items and different intricate... Designed them intricately, is what I'm trying to say. So that's then, as you go into the town, each building is decorated, well, not decorated. The architecture of each building is completely different from any other town in the game. You know, there's windows, and there's wine racks, and I can't even begin to sum it all up, but it looks gorgeous, and it adds so much to making the setting feel real. And my favorite in terms of just having an entire area for just no reason is also in the same town, believe it or not, where basically when you get to the town center, you can go down a path forward from your perspective, and you get into a completely different screen where you walk down a boardwalk, well, a stone pathway to a landing zone for a giant ship, and when you talk to the people there, they say that this is the first steamship ever created to not use wind power. There is no plot reason to be in there. There is no story development in that area. It's just there. And you just see this massive ship, and you go on it. Okay, it's maybe not that massive when you're on it, but you step on it, and there's a Titanic reference on the bow. There's a couple standing there, and one's like, hey, let's do that thing, and then he embraces her, like in Titanic, when they're on the bow of it and singing. And you can see the individual floorboards on the boat. You know? And this game was made in 2003, so that's 10 years ago. Wow, I'm old. 2003 on the GameCube. So, for them to bring out this much detail on this thing for no purpose is truly astounding. That you can see, on the back of the ship, you know, towards the steering wheel, there's a door to the lower decks. You can't go down there. You can't go down to the lower decks. You can't open the door or anything. You can't interact with the door. It's just there. I love it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a weirdo, but what I'm trying to say is that the game goes out of its way to make those minor details matter. And I love it. And also the food shops sell food relative to the location. Like, you see a lot of seafood in that area, and vegetables in a farmland, or whatever. So, the game's presentation has a cel-shaded anime style, kind of like Wind Waker. And, the artist is named Kosuke Fujishima, and the game's environments and characters and the enemies and everything just looks great. It looks phenomenal. In certain scenes, something will look really good from far away, but then as it gets really up close, there might be some blur, and it might lose some of its detail, and it looks a bit better if you push it back a bit, but even then, it still looks really good. The voice acting in the game is very well done, surprisingly, and the game is translated really well. And some scenes are voiced, and some aren't, but some of them should have been that aren't. I can't really talk about it's because of spoilers. The ones that I would have given as an example, I can't really talk about. The environments look very, very colorful and beautiful. Like, there's one area very late in the game on the second disc where the second disc means like the last third of the game. The first disc is huge. There's one area pretty far in, which is a really thick rainforest that's in the middle of a swamp, and there's just boardwalks going in each direction, creating kind of a maze, and the tree branches merge with the boardwalk. They curve down in a way so that you can run them up them and go up on the trees and across different paths, and there's canopy, well, not canopy, but there's like higher up boardwalks, and the music there and the scenery look phenomenal and sound phenomenal, and I really don't have words for this. You just have to look at it for yourself. The music is great. I guess I'll just get that out of the way here. The music is phenomenal in the game. They perfectly fit the atmosphere of a given area. Like, there's this one town later on in the game that's deep in a giant forest, and the trees are towering over all the buildings, and there's very few people in the town because it's a small one in the middle of nowhere, and there's this song that's just... it's one of my favorite ones in the game. Where there's basically, it uses a harp, and it creates a lot of these slow-paced chords, and there's a tin whistle, I think, and it just sounds really... it really captures the feeling as if you had woken up in the middle of a forest at like 6 a.m. when the dew is just settled, and it's slightly misty, and the trees are towering over you, and you just need to look up the song. Just do me a favor and do that. It's called Deepest Woods. Just look up that song. It is gorgeous. So, one of the issues, kind of, with the game's cutscenes is that every character, big or small, has one well, more than one, but they have one animation for basically, except for certain expressions, they have one animation for when they're just talking. And that particular one is used most of the time, because the other ones will be like they're shocked, or like they're angry, but for the most part they're just doing that one thing, and it can get really jarring after a while when you've been seeing it for so long and there's no difference or anything. It can get pretty annoying. I don't really want to get into that much further, but I don't really mind it. there's also one other issue that can crop up every now and again, where if you have where the cutscenes show up in text bubbles, and they'll be, as the voice acting will be spoken as the text is scrolling, and they'll say things like, well, basically what'll happen is they'll have, say, like 6 lines of dialogue, but their speech bubble is only big to fit 3. So what will happen is they'll be talking, yada 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 yada, and like they'll just stop their sentence right here. Usually there'll be a break, like a comma or a period, and then you press A, and then they'll just keep talking and finish their sentence like that. For the most part, it's okay. There's some other times where it really doesn't work, and it's annoying, but other than that, it works. That's really all I can say, is if you're the kind of person who finds that little thing to be annoying, then I'm sorry, but it's okay to deal with. I mean, it's not really that much of a big deal. The cutscenes themselves aren't really as well animated as other games, but, so usually the characters will just be standing around spouting their lines, and there will be very little action every now and again, well, for the most part, but, the animation's okay. It's not phenomenal. It's not like, well, like, Final Fantasy X and X-2 were coming out around the same time, and, they are animated really, really well, and this game is, not in comparison, but the animation can be a little, like, I don't know, I don't really have the words to explain it, but it's okay, but there are some times where it's a little iffy. Alright, I think I'm done with the game aspects now. Here's your warning, alright? I'm going to spoil the rest of the game, the entire game story. Well, not the entire thing, but I'm going to spoil the game right now. So, well, not right now, but maybe, like, you got about a minute. So, here's your official warning. If you don't want to deal with spoilers, stop the video now. And rewatch it once you've played the game or seen the animation episodes or whatever. And so, yeah, here's your warning. I'm going to talk about the spoiler stuff right now. Okay, so let's talk about the themes first. Tales of Symphonia has a lot of themes in it. I am probably missing quite a few, honestly. I'm also going to start with one that's kind of really weird, and probably not one that's accepted as game canon, but it's one that I've noticed and picked up every time I play the game. So, I'm going to say it just because, it's something I've picked up and I think actually is a really good theme for the game. And what I'm talking about is a theme called, Who Are You Behind Your Mask? I know, that's a really weird sounding one, but hear me out. So basically, every main character in the game is wearing a mask, for lack of a better words. They are hiding certain aspects of themselves behind other aspects. This is especially apparent in Colette. Colette is basically the original reason where I came up with this idea, and then the rest pieced together. So, basically, okay, let's use Colette as an example. Colette hides all of her true feelings behind a smile. Colette doesn't want people to worry about her. She wants people to be happy. So she tries to be happy even when she knows she really isn't. And so she hides all of her feelings behind the mask of her smile, and her lighthearted attitude, and her giggles and saying, no, really, I'm okay, you don't need to worry. And it isn't until a while that you really see what she's hiding. There's a specific scene on your journey of regeneration. There's a specific scene after you've done the third seal where you figure out Lloyd basically tricks her by giving her coffee and says, oh, hey, this coffee's hot, and and she says, yeah, isn't that hot? And she's like, yep, it is. And then he says, it's actually iced coffee. And then she says, what, really? And he says, yeah, I've made it cold. And then she says, yeah, yeah, of course it's cold. And then he's like, and then Lloyd says, I lied. That coffee is actually hot. And at that point he realizes Colette was lying to him the whole time. She was hiding her suffering. The fact that she loses... actually, you know what, I'll do that here. So he realizes that Colette was hiding her suffering and that she was losing her humanity with each seal she unlocks. Where at the first one, suddenly she couldn't eat anything anymore because if she tried, she couldn't hold it down. And then when she didn't eat, she felt fine. So she stopped eating and had no reason to. So she couldn't eat anymore. And then after the second one, she couldn't sleep anymore. And then after the third, she couldn't feel anything tactile sensation. And I believe emotional, too, actually. But it's not really explained very well. Well, it's... Later on, you see that, yeah, it was emotional. Eventually, she lost emotion, but I think at that point she hadn't. But, so, that's where you learn... Yeah, that's where you learn... Actually, no, that is the first reveal, but I'll get into that later. Well, the revelation, really, but that's where you learn for the first time that Colette was hiding everything behind her mask of happiness. And that's kind of the theme, that's kind of one of the themes of the game, is that everyone is hiding something, and they are hiding it behind something else. As I review each character, I'll say what their mask is, but it's also worth noting that every character in the game is more or less based on a character cliché. Like Colette, like I said, she's basically based on a cute, happy girl who's completely... she's a klutz, so she falls a lot and is cute, and you know, you get what I'm trying to say. So, in a way, each character's cliché is also a mask that they wear. And with each character, with each cliché, that is also a mask they hide behind. Because they are purposefully limiting themselves to hide who they truly are. And I'll explain the details of that later on. So, now we have a theme which is basically the biggest one of the game. Discrimination. Or really, well, yeah, discrimination in general. And I also pair this one with another one, but they're kind of two separate ones, but I pair them together. And that each life is equal, and all life has value. Every main character and every secondary character is a social outcast, more or less. They aren't what society would say to be kind of the majority of what a... I don't know, I'm messing myself up. But basically, every character has a shtick that makes them kind of an outcast from other people, more or less. Like, Lloyd lives outside his home village of Isalia, and he's raised by a dwarf. And that's his dad. He's not his biological dad, but his adopted father. Genus and Rain, I'm just gonna admit it right here, are half-elves. Sheena is an outcast of Mizuho, and Regal's a prisoner. You get the point. Every character has a thing that makes them easily discriminated against. You know, you could say every character in the game, every single one, faces discrimination or hatred, unacceptance, or belittling in general. Like, in one of the first scenes where Isalia gets sacked, and then you have your first boss, not the tutorial one, you have your first real challenging boss. You then hear the mayor of the town mock Lloyd for being an outsider raised by the dwarf, right? And how everyone kicks him out of the town because of what he did, and also because of that. every character, by the end of the game, makes peace with what they could not change about themselves, or what caused them to be the outcast. Discrimination diminishes each person's humanity and their right to life. This is just a fact, like in-game and in real life. Because especially later on, Genis and Rain have to deal with the discrimination against half-elves, of which there is a lot. And it also diminishes who they are as a person. And the game has almost a masterfully written use of cliché, like I said. Every character has a cliché mask. And it's phenomenal how the game pulls this off, in a way, because I feel like, I'm not entirely sure if this was intended or not, but because of every character's cliché, you say, like, oh, Lloyd's just a, unintelligent but loyal to his friend's kid, and then Genis is just a little genius little brat kid, and Colette's that derpy girl, and ditzy girl, or whatever, and Kratos is a mysterious dude, and Regal's a prisoner, who cares about him? So, the game uses those cliches of them masterfully, because every character is because of their cliche, the player at first sees them for the cliche, and the player discriminates against them. The player only sees a part of that person. They see the cliche mask, and they dismiss the character right away. They're just, oh, they're that. No, they are not. They have so much depth and complexity later on, and then you realize just how much of a whole person they are, and how you treated them from the moment you saw them. And then that discrimination aspect is turned in upon the player, where they realize, how many times do I do that to everyone, everywhere? And then that's where the game's theme really shines, because it makes you realize just how humans act, well, how people act and behave and treat others, and it affects you. It really makes you feel. The Japanese translation of the game means to resonate with you, RPG. It really does. So I think that's about... Oh, and one last thing. How fitting that I'm wearing a shirt that says this. Racism hurts everyone. Couldn't be further from the truth. It's the truth. So about the second half of this theme, the all life has value and each life is equal thing. So each character is an individual. They are not the stereotypes or the aspects that they are discriminated for by the characters in-game or by the player by seeing their cliche. And every character shows that they have a right to life. They show that they have a reason to be there, and they have the right to be there, and that they are significant for just existing. And every character, the discrimination they face tries to belittle that, and tries to make them feel like they are worthless, like they don't belong, like they are better off being dead. And unfortunately, that happens a lot in the real world. And the game does a really good job of showing that. But in order to complement the theme of discrimination is to show that every single person is more than just that aspect of them that people discriminate against. That they are a person, they are whole, just as you or I or anyone else. And that all of us, every life, is important, and everyone deserves to live. It is our most fundamental right as a thing that exists, that we deserve to continue living. all life has innate value. And you see how these themes affect the real world. This is why I say this is one of the greatest stories I have ever experienced. It really applies to the world. And every life has that innate value and must never be belittled and discriminated to the point of allowing one's qualities to be reason enough to hate and ostracize and kill over. The discrimination in the world and the setting in the game leads the party to change the world fundamentally and make it a place where everyone has the right to live freely and everyone's life matters. That's a very, very powerful theme. So the next one I've got here: crime, punishment, and forgiveness. Now, this is also really good writing. Every party member and every plot-significant NPC, well, not every single one, but a lot of the significant NPCs has committed a crime in one way or another. Some of the NPCs get away with it, like Varley, up until basically the end. Well, a little bit before the end, but some of them... some get away with it with no repercussions, some get punished, some get convicted, some get away but deal with the very heavy emotional repercussions of it. And you see all kinds of coping and the results of the crime. And every single person deals with knowing that they committed a crime. Now, some don't care. A lot of the NPCs and the antagonists in the game don't care. They don't care that... Some of them, anyways, don't care that they're doing horrible things to people. And some of them some of them care very, very much and do whatever they can to be forgiven for it, to atone for it, to either be properly punished or to seek forgiveness from those that they've wronged. This is best shown in Regal and Persea, those two, and then Lloyd, Kratos, and Zelos. Lloyd to either of those two. Not all three, just Lloyd to both of them. I'll go into that later, but... I'll talk about Lloyd and Kratos now, but, spoiler alert, by the way. Kratos follows you around for basically the first quarter to the first third of the game, for a huge, significant chunk, and you basically don't know that much about him. And then you hit a specific scene at the Tower of Salvation where suddenly everything goes nuts, and you learn Kratos has been deceiving you from the very beginning. And at that point, from there until the end of the game, you are unsure of whether or not Kratos is evil or if he's on your side. And basically the scenes right before the final dungeon, you have to fight, you're Lloyd, you have to fight Kratos one-on-one, and when you beat him, Kratos says, well, aren't you going to kill me? Then Lloyd says, I have defeated Kratos, the one who has betrayed us, and I forgive Kratos, the hero who has helped us. And it takes the entire game for Lloyd to be able to forgive Kratos for what he did. And for Zelos, well, I'll get into that later, I guess. And I'll get into Persea and Regal later. Some characters can't forgive those who've done wrong to them, such as Kuchinawa to Sheena, where... I really don't want to be talking about all these right now, but basically Sheena caused a lot of people to die in her village, and Kuchinawa could not forgive her for that. Kuchinawa held it against her for so many years. And in-game, when you see him, he basically goes after you for quite a huge chunk of the game. And then Sheena challenges him to a duel, and then whether or not you win, he still doesn't forgive you. So that's kind of the extreme example of someone who cannot forgive someone who has wronged them. Because what happens is, of the people who died that Sheena caused to die, Kuchinawa's parents were among them. And he can't forgive Sheena for that. And then some characters can forgive those who have wronged them. This is kind of a bad example, but basically Rain to her mom, Virginia. This is a completely optional scene. I wish it was required because it's so good. Basically, Rain and Genus were abandoned as children, and Rain believes that her parents just didn't care about them because they were half-elves, purposefully abandoned them. And then you learn, well, first you encounter Virginia and see how broken she is over the whole thing, and that she is basically living a lie, thinking that a little doll is her daughter. It's an absolutely heartbreaking scene. I tear up every time I see that scene, because it's just so... The voice acting is so good in that scene. It's just so... You can feel the pain that Rain feels at being rejected. And then you learn from the village elder and read her diary, and read Virginia's diary, that she never abandoned her daughter. She sent her daughter to another world, which I'll get into later, for the hopes that her daughter would not become a slave living in a basement her entire life. Hoping that her daughter, in this new world, would finally be free of the hate that she would receive simply for existing as a half-elf. And Rain forgives her mother almost immediately because she realizes why her mom abandoned her. Because her mom truly believed that her life would be better in the other world. And it was. So back to the theme, some escape punishment for their crime, for either being an organized criminal like Varley, or for having social power, such as the Desian Grand Cardinals, or Governor General Doors betraying the people of Palmacosta because he's working with the Desians to cure his wife. Some are punished severely for no crime at all, simply because they have no social power, or because they exist, like the half-elves. Some punishments for crimes are just, such as Varley's death and Rhode Isle's. And some are unjust, such as Kate's sentence of execution for allowing the party to escape imprisonment, and for her doing what she truly believed was right. So, the game shows so many different ways of how crime affects people, how crime affects society and others, how punishments play out, and how people forgive each other, or can't. And it's a wonderful theme. Okay, let's talk about the last theme here. Love, togetherness, and that you are never alone. This is a theme that's also in Final Fantasy VI, but here is also really shown really well. Every single character in the game has someone who is with them and supports them and loves them. Every single one. Even the townsfolk. They're even the tiniest people in the towns that have nothing to do with the game or the story have friends, neighbors, workers, family, lovers, comrades in arms even. Students, you know? That's also another thing in Palmacosta. There's a whole other area that's just a giant school that has nothing to do with anything. There's an optional scene, but that's it. And, every character in the party has characters that care for them. And to the party as a whole. Like Lloyd and Genus are best friends and care about each other. And Colette, all three of them, best friends. Genus and Rain love each other as family. Zelos, well, Presea and Regal are bonded together as those who have lost their time, as those who have lost themselves to time. Sheena is together with everyone in the party. All of them are her friends because she didn't have any in her village. Regal especially finds unity in the party, and Zelos too, because Regal was a prisoner. Regal had no one. Neither did Zelos. Zelos was an outcast because he was the chosen of Mana for Tethe'alla. And Zelos had no one until the party happened. Until they found the party and joined them. And they realized they had friends. They had someone with them. Every character in the game, except for a slight few, like the Design Grand Cardinals, but even I would argue that they have each other to at least compete with. I mean, I don't even know if they even like each other. They're in competition with each other to be the best. And they even have subordinates and whatnot, but you could argue either way with that, and I'm not going to get into that. Even Altessa has someone. He has Tabitha, who he made. Even the residents of Exire, who are in this floating city that are completely cut off from everything, they have each other. Even Kate, like I said, is a half-elf living in a basement, is enslaved, and is forced to commit scientific experiments her entire life. And mind you, half-elves live much longer than humans. They live in the setting... elves live up to a millennium, but half-elves, I imagine, would live about anywhere from 400 to 600 years on average. Even the Pope in the game has... he doesn't have a name. Even the Pope in the game has someone. He has the church to follow him. He has people who are there for him. And all of someone who is significant to them, who they can say they are close to. Only by the end of the game, the last few hours, there is one character who has no one. There is one person who has absolutely no one. He is truly alone. I'm talking about the antagonist of the game, Mythos. He is truly alone. But I'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, hey, sorry about the awkward cut. I just got really hungry and had to eat, so... I had to stop. I wouldn't have been able to keep doing this otherwise. So, I don't know if I made this very clear the last time, but, earlier in the recording, but, even though I said that this, I think, is the greatest story ever written, it's my favorite game, obviously. But, do I think it's the best? I mean, personal feelings aside, I don't know, but it is really good at least, so, just know, again, reminder that this is personal feelings, so, yeah, just keep that in mind, and, I have not played Dawn of the New World yet. I intend to, but I have not, at the time of this recording. And I might consider doing another review like this for Dawn of the New World, and maybe for other Tales games, but I haven't really thought about it yet. That being said, let's continue. So, let's talk about the game's pacing. Now, Tales games usually do this a lot. They will have, basically, you'll just be going for quite a while. Here, I'll actually do like this. Alright, so you'll be going for a while, and, things are kind of smooth sailing, slight increases a little bit here and there, and then there'll come one scene that is just a giant spike of just tons of stuff suddenly happens at once, and tons of details come out of nowhere, and then it just goes back down and keeps going, back to where kind of it was. Or maybe sometimes it doesn't plummet, but other times it plummets and keeps going. So, in Tales of Symphonia, basically you start out, and it seems really... Remember that thing how I was saying about who are you behind your mask? This game, even the story's narrative does that theme. The game's story, not just the characters, has that theme. So let me explain it. So you start off, and you got the school scene, and you got the intro with Cam Clark voicing over it, and it keeps going kind of pretty smooth, and you learn a few things, and then there's like a little pop right when the design attack on Iselia happens because of Lloyd intervening and talking to Marble. He went with Genus. Genus is a friend of Marble's, and then Marble, apostrophe S, and then she's in the design human ranch near Iselia, by the way, and then it's hurt my arm. Then the designs obviously find out that what happened. Lloyd intervenes and tries to stop the designs from whipping her. So basically his plan fails, and they know who he is. And then the town gets ransacked, and then Lloyd and Genus have to fight a giant monster, which turns out to be Marble. So what happened was all the people in the design ranches have X-spheres on them without something called a key crest, which basically stops the X-sphere. The X-sphere is basically a parasite, and the key crest stops the parasite from, well, the parasitic nature of the sphere from happening, more or less. So if you remove the X-sphere without the key crest, then you turn into a monster. The game explains that pretty early. Because of this scene. Basically, the game handles things very well, like soft science. Like, if you have soft science in a story, it's best to just explain the concept and move on. Like Mass Effect's Element Zero. You just explain it, move on. You know, you don't really revisit it that much. You establish it and then go. So this game does that a lot. Because if you actually tried to think about it, the more you thought about those kinds of things, if you actually tried to go hard science on it, it'd obviously fall apart. So, basically, X-sphere equals parasite. Removing X-sphere equals monster. Well, it makes you a monster. Giant, weird, green or blue thing that, I don't know, giant Cyclops monster thing. Alright, so, then you fight Marble, but you don't know it's her. And then Lloyd and Genus get banished. Colette, right before all this, Colette got the Oracle and is going on her regeneration journey to heal the world of Silverant because it's in decline of mana. And she, Kratos, and Rain have already left. So then Lloyd and Genus get banished, and then they catch up to Colette. So basically, there's a little spike at the Iselia attack, and you fight Marble, and then it just kind of keeps smoothing out for basically about 10 hours of gameplay, maybe more, depending on how fast you go through this. So then you go through the next 3 seals, and then there's a little slight hop again when you get to the Asgard Ranch, and you learn that X-spheres are made out of human lives. And that's the first twist of the game, really. I'm going to take a quick jump here to talk about what I consider to be the difference between a twist and a revelation. Now, basically the core difference is that a twist just comes out of nowhere. I mean, it's just completely out of left field. There's no previous foreshadowing or anything. It's just, oh, suddenly this, like, you know? Whereas a revelation has quite a bit of foreshadowing to it. Or at least it's something that someone could have guessed would happen. So, I'll give you guys examples as we move along in this example. So, anyways, Asgard Ranch. X-spheres are made out of human lives, so all the designs are torturing people in their human ranches, basically within an inch of their lives, and then they slaughter them, and then make the X-sphere. So, the X-sphere Genus has is the X-sphere that Marble had. that Marble was making, well, being made on her, and then the one Lloyd has is his mom's. And so you realize that, oh, these guys are, I almost cursed, these guys are, glad I got myself, these guys are, turning humans into these horrible machines, more, well, not machines, but horrible artifacts, and that needs to stop, for lack of a better word. So there's the slight twist, and then back, and then, oh wait, no, there was one before that. Okay, so you hit the third seal, and then you learn, that's where you get the coffee scene that I mentioned with Colette, where she was hiding the fact that she was suffering. So you get that revelation, because it was foreshadowed about that Colette was changing at the end of each seal, and it's actually shown in each scene afterward, but all the skits actually allude to it too, about all of her changes, that she can't sleep, and then there's one specifically, if you go to an inn, that shows up, which everyone goes to sleep, if after this point, before you hit the fourth seal anyways, but between the second and fourth seals, there's a thing where a skit where Colette can't sleep. So it's hinted, it's at least foreshadowed or hinted at that something's going on. And there's also one about her eating, and there's little slivers of things that you could guess what's going on here and there. And that's what I consider to be the difference between what is a revelation and a twist, if you know what I mean. Alright, so, revelation with Colette, but yeah, revelation with X-Spheres, but that. I know, that's a weird sound. And then you discover, oh, Sheena joins the party around this time. And she's been trying to kill Colette this whole time. And then you learn about Tetheala, so, oh, that's a big one. And then back. That's also a revelation, because she hints that, she keeps saying, like, this world will be saved, or, like, well, they have things on this side, too, you know, or, like, they're still using steam power on this side, like, you know, so she's from the prosperous world of Tetheala, and what happens is each world, if one world's prospering, another one's declining, so Colette's, that's the water pump, by the way, Colette's journey is to switch the mana flow and make Sylvaron be the prosperous world for a while. So you learn about that, that's kind of important, and then you get the Tower of Salvation, where, actually I counted it out, I think there's about, if you count every twist and revelation, I think there's about 12 different things that happen in this scene. I don't have the notebook with me that I wrote it all out in, but I have to say that there's at least 10, if not more, in this scene. So basically, you get, boom, like a skyrocket spike of pacing, because suddenly you have, let's see, Colette's gonna die. The end of this. Colette's body is gonna be used to revive the Goddess Martel. Kratos bad. Angel's bad. Crucius bad. Well, so that's 4. What else is there? You fight Remiel. Learn Yggdrasil. You learn about Yggdrasil. And you learn about the Renegades. I can't remember all of them. But basically, there's so many things that happen in like a 5... Well, it's more like a 15-20 minute window. Oh yeah, and then you learn the Renegades want Lloyd. And why angels are angels, about Crucius crystals, which are stronger X-Spheres that turn people into angels. Again, establish, move on. So, you got this spike, and then basically you have the fight with Remiel, which you have to win, and I don't want to talk about Remiel, but just don't even get me started. I do not like the guy, but I'm just going to leave that. So you spike up, you fight him, you defeat him, he dies, and then Kratos is an angel, and then you fight Kratos, and he completely destroys you, unless you're doing a replay or something, and you know what you're doing. And whether or not you defeat him, Lord Yggdrasil, the leader of Crucius and the Desians, shows up, and then you... This fight, there is no way to win this fight. It is impossible. Every attack you deals 1 damage to him. Every single one. And every attack of his is basically a one-shot. And given that you probably lost against Kratos, you're probably all at 1 hit point each at the start anyways. So he completely destroys you, and then the Renegades show up and get you out of there, and then you're in the Renegade base, where everything's quiet, and then you learn that the Renegades want Lloyd, and you kind of start to get a little slight explanation about everything, but admittedly, if it's your first run, you're going to be confused. I was confused until like the 3rd time I played through this game. It's the most confusing scene in the game. So then it basically continues the pace it was at, right, like, for most of the game. Up until when you hit the pact with Volt, really, is where it begins picking up again. So you steal the Rayards, go to the airships. You steal the airships, travel to Tetheala, they crash, because of mana, I don't know. And then, you go to Meltokio, get Zelos and Presea, and then you go to Cybac, learn about Crucius crystals and how they evolve. Oh, and all this time, Colette lost herself, so she's basically a walking mindless husk. So that's the whole reason why you go to Tetheala, is to try and find a way to cure Colette, because Silverant won't offer anything, and Crucius is after you. So you go to Tetheala, you heal Colette, well, you figure out a way to heal Colette, so you look at... It's still going, alright. Give me 1 moment. Okay, so apparently my sprinklers decided to turn on at 1 in the morning. Well, again, they're not mine, but whatever. So, back to the story. So you get Zelos, you get Presea, you're trying to cure Colette. Man, I'm getting a headache. So much to think about. Then you discover about Crucius crystals, how they're evolved tech spheres that allow people to become angels. I mean, I don't know, they just turn you into... No biggie. And then there's a little spike, when you discover that in Tetheala, half-elves are at the bottom of the caste system. So, they are executed for any crime without question. So if you jaywalked down the street and you were a half-elf and you were caught, which you probably would be, because you're a half-elf, you would be executed for that. For jaywalking. Think about that. A human would get away with it just fine, because they're human. But a half-elf? No. So, the game hits you pretty hard about that right away. And then Genis and Rain get captured, you're thrown in the basement of the academy, and then that's where you find out about Presea has a Crucius... She's developing a Crucius crystal within her because Kate was doing an experiment ordered by the Pope and Rodile and Varley and and then... So then you get Genis and Rain back. I know, I'm just basically reciting the game at this point, I'm sorry. So then you go into the thing, you go into the forest, find Regal. Wait, no. First you go to the Fuji Mountains, fall into the trap, fight Purnima. Then you go back to Meltokio, go to, what is it, the Elemental Research Laboratory, I think that one was called. You get the boat, and then you sail back to Cybac, talk to Kate, and then, I think. Anyways, then you basically go to the forest, you meet you met Regal in the sewer, and then you fight Regal in the forest, take him with you, and then he joins the party. Go to Mizuho, talk to the chief, and then that's where Lloyd says he wants to change the world and end discrimination, because, yay, yes! Then, where do you go there? You go to Ozette, drop Presea off, talk to Altessa, figure out about her Crucius crystal, and then Colette gets captured, and then you cure Presea's... Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, Lloyd made a key crest in in Cyback for Colette, which ended up working on Mount Fuji, so she's fine. She's back to herself. There's just like a 2, 3, 4 hour game content window where she is creepy and has red eyes. And then you go to the mine, get the inhibitor ore for Presea's key crest, and then you make the one for her. So then Colette gets captured. Then you heal Presea, make her not a robot, because you give her the key crest, and then that's where you have to go make the pact with Volt there. So then you go to the Temple of Lightning. I'll talk about this in Sheena's thing, but Sheena failed to do a pact with Volt before, and then that's what killed off so many of her townspeople, her villagers, so many of her friends and family. Kuchinawa's parents. So you make the pact with Volt. Corinne dies. Corinne, I forgot to mention Corinne. He's an artificial summon spirit that is Sheena's best only friend until she joins the party. And then I don't really want to talk about Sheena right now, but well, I do, but so much to talk about. Basically, you make the pact with Volt. Then you go to the Renegade base, get the Rayards back, the airships. Then you go after Colette, and then you go to all the summon spirits. So basically, there's the build-up again. When you hit Volt, it starts this way. It starts spiking up again and slowly building, because with each summon spirit you make the pact with, there's this anticipation that something huge is going to happen, because the summon spirits basically protect the seed of the giant tree of ever-flowing mana that's in the center of the two worlds. And the summon spirits have these 4 seals on each world that protect it. And if you make pacts with them, the seals break, and then the Great Seed is exposed. So there's this build up as you're, and then you jump over to Silverant and help out the Renegades, defeat Rhode Isle, and then Presea gets her revenge on the guy. Caught myself again. And then, oh yeah, I forgot to mention Mythos. You find a little kid named Mythos who follows you around, then he saves you from the flooding room of death, and then Boda dies. I forgot to mention him. I'm sorry. I'm just reciting the game by memory at this point. I'm really sorry. This is just to help emphasize the plot thing. So it's just build up. You go to Silverant, do the ranch thing, build up, and then just what? And basically, there's a scene that shows the Great Seed go out of control, and the giant tree of ever-flowing mana suddenly gets angry at what you're doing, and the only way you can stop it is by shooting the mana of Tethial's summon spirits at it to get it to shut up and go back in the ground, like, basically hit it with a giant hammer, like, So, there's sudden twist, and then dungeon, and then end of first disc. And second disc, oh, and then at the end of the dungeon you also learn that Colette is suffering a sickness that is crystallizing her body. Yeah. It's called Chronic Angelus Crystallis Inefficium. I know that's a long word. Don't ask me how I memorized that. I play this game too much. So then, you know, it's like, again, you have Tower of Salvation, kapong, and then kapong, right? And then it's just kind of like slow again, and then you hit Tower of Salvation again, and then you learn about Gaia, which is a town of angels, and it's creepy as all heck, because these angels are just floating around aimlessly as if they're just lifeless, which they are. They're not human anymore. They lost everything about them that was human, or half-elf, or whatever. They lost everything that made them alive. They're basically an empty doll floating around. So you're in this really creepy place. You're trying to get all the cures for Colette's illness. So you go up there and get it, and then you go through the most annoying dungeon in the entire game. For all those who don't know, basically, if you've ever played Pokemon Gold and Silver and played through the Ice Tunnel, imagine that times 10. Basically, there are like 4 levels of sliding floor puzzles. Every hallway looks the same. You have no idea where you're going. The sliding floor puzzles are extremely difficult. Well, not extremely, but very difficult. It's a huge difficulty spike out of nowhere. And the game doesn't really do a good job of training you for it. And so, admittedly, it's the only time in the game where I'm just like, oh my god, I have to do this thing. Alright, let me just get out. I remember the index cards I mentioned earlier? I actually wrote out on 2 separate ones on both sides the solution to the entire dungeon. This thing drives me nuts. I do not like that dungeon at all, and anyone who's played the game knows why. So, then you go there, and then you talk to... Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. Right. Lord Yggdrasil that you met the first time you went to the Tower of Salvation. All the way over here, like 25 to 30 hours later, you talk to him again. The second time you've seen him. And he explains just what the heck's going on. He tells you that by creating a world of lifeless beings, of angels who no longer have any emotion, and thus no hate, he creates a world where there is no discrimination, and no hate, and no intolerance. Because everyone is the same. And then you fight him, and then you cure Colette, and then you have, so it was build up, Ching Kotong again, because right up here, you learn that Mythos kid who was following you around basically the whole time is actually Lord Yggdrasil, the bad guy, and then you find out, spoiler alert, by the way, that Kratos is Lloyd's dad. I forgot to mention Kratos shows up every now and again, then you fought him before you went to Welgaia, but Kratos is Lloyd's dad. And then, actually, it kind of stays up here, to be honest. It stays like this for the rest of the game. As, you then go to the Hall of Great Seed, Zelos betrays you, and then you have to go save Colette from becoming Martel's vessel. Everyone falls into a trap except for Lloyd. Well, actually, even Lloyd does, depending on your choices of who was your friend, had your highest friendship level. Basically, Colette, Kratos, and Zelos all give you items that are equipable accessories that, basically in the cutscene, if it's not one of them, he'll dodge an arrow out of nowhere, or if it is one of them, he'll get shot in the chest by an arrow, and then the item that they gave him is what protects his life. So, honestly, I kind of prefer that. I prefer that over the scenes where he's just, whoa! What was that? So, moving on. So, Yggdrasil gets Martel into Martel to take over Colette's body, and then she's like, Mythos, what have you done? You made the world terrible! You need to stop, dude! Okay, she's a lot more elegant than that, but you get what I'm trying to say. And then Mythos, because he's so messed up, he completely misinterprets that and doesn't understand, and then goes nuts, and then you fight him. And then you kill him, and then you take Genis takes his Crucius Crystal, and then you have to go fight Kratos to get I know, I'm leaving out so many details, and this game is this game is complex, but not too complex, but just too complex to be able to sum up very quickly, is the thing. So, then you go to the Torrent Forest, and then you fight Kratos. Actually, it was like a little dip, but then you fight Kratos, and then a slight big spike again, and then just stays that way. Well, you fight Kratos, get Origin Seal, then you can use the Eternal Sword, which is how Lord Yggdrasil split the world in half and made the worlds vie for mana in the first place, because that way pointless wars would not break out that would drain the world of its mana and kill everyone. And then also, that way, the level of... What else? The What was the second thing? Alright, so he could closely watch over the family lineages and breed chosen to become the vessels for Martell. I think there were a few other reasons, but I forget. So, anyways, you get Origin, so you can use the Eternal Sword, and then the Tower of Salvation gets destroyed. In case anyone doesn't know, it's a tower that extends past the outer atmosphere of the world. And it connects to an alien world called Deris Karlon, which is basically a floating comet that passes by the world. And Mythos locked it in place. It's how the elves got on the world. And so Deris Karlon shows up out of nowhere because why not? And well, there's a reason, because it's being hidden the whole time. And then suddenly the sky goes purple because there's this world that has a purple sky out of nowhere. It's like, if this is the outer atmosphere of the world, it's like here. So they would have collided if it weren't for the Eternal Sword. So this one sword is doing so much, it has so much magical power that it can hold two worlds like this together with just a little tower connecting them. So, get the Eternal Sword. Mythos is Crucius Crystal. He's been living inside the Crucius Crystal the entire time, because that's the way Martell survived all these years. And he takes over the person you have the most highest friendship level with. If it's not Kratos, it's Colette. And then teleports off to Deris Karlon, which is the coolest name ever, by the way. And then you teleport up there with the Eternal Sword, and then Final Dungeon. So, and it just keeps going. So, after reciting the entire game to you, I'm sorry, that's the story's pacing, where it just goes ching boom. Yeah! I make so much weird noises. Freedom of exploration pacing. So, the game is very much linear. This is going to be a lot faster, by the way, sorry. The game is very much linear up until you hit about the Osa Trail, where you then get a choice of... You can do the next 3 seals in any order. I need to exploit this more, I haven't really done it that much. The game is scaled so that going to the water seal next would be the easiest, and then going to the wind and then the light. But you could do it in any order you want, it's just going to be harder. So that's kind of like a little hop, and then you hit Tetheala where it goes back down again, sort of. Because, I mean, as you're slowly going across Silverant, you can explore more and more of the world, but then it just kind of dips again, because your ability to explore Tetheala is pretty limited until you get the boat. Specifically until after you meet Altessa. And then after you meet Altessa, you can go... It kind of does like a hop again, and then you can go anywhere. Well, not anywhere, but a lot of places on the world. And you can explore a little bit. Then you get the airships, and then it goes like this. And you can go, well, okay, maybe not quite that, but it goes like, yeah, there you go. Kind of like tops off right there. Because you're still in Tetheala, you can't go to Silverant yet. And you can go anywhere in Tetheala. Well, not anywhere, because you still can't go to some of the Disc 2 places. You fly around for a bit, and then you go to Silverant, where suddenly there's even more, because now you can explore even more of Silverant than you could last time. And then, after you do the Remote Island Ranch and fight Rodile, you then top off with a giant spike, and then you can go to either world, anywhere, at any time. So, yeah, the game does a very good job of handling its exploration, but for quite a long time, you are just on your feet on the ground for, like, the whole time. And then afterwards, the game moves by a lot faster, because suddenly there's not as much world map travel, because you can just fly anywhere, anytime. So, let's see, that's done. I already did that. Okay, let's go to the characters. This is going to be a long one. This is admittedly where my issues with words are probably going to start fumbling up, and you're going to start hearing me have a lot of issues. because I don't really think on my feet very well. Lloyd Irving. Oh, and before I talk about that, this game has an ensemble cast in that there is no main character. There are main characters. You could argue that Lloyd is the main, because you could also argue that Colette is. You could even argue that Mythos is. But I digress. So, Lloyd Irving, alright. So, with each character, I'm going to list off their mask that I mentioned, their cliche or their what they're hiding. So, Lloyd's cliche mask is of an unintelligent teenager, but he's a very loyal friend. Like, you know, that's kind of an archetype very often. His character mask is of his loyalty, again, and of his enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is like, it's more frequently in the beginning of the game, where you go to a new dungeon, and he's like, wow, I can't wait to explore this place, and then you get to the end, he's like, ugh, that took so long, when are we done here? To be honest, Lloyd has kind of a weak mask, I guess that's the point behind his character. But what he's hiding until the scene with Kate is that he's hiding his desire to change what he cannot accept. His character's theme is of life, of acceptance, and of goodness. Dwarven vow number 7. Goodness and love will always win. So Lloyd starts out, and he's really, like I said, an unintelligent but very loyal kid. And then, basically, he's shown as being really bad at school. But then when you meet Marble, you see that he's very intelligent about crafting X-spheres. So that immediately you see behind the mask of him being stupid. You see he's smart, but not school smart. And then the attack at Esalia happens, and Lloyd is forced to mature basically out of nowhere, because he was responsible for so many people dying. And he has to cope with that. He has to deal with it. A 17-year-old kid can't really cope with something like that very easily, now can they? He struggles with that for the rest of the game. As many people struggle with many things for the rest of their game. With his mistakes, and of knowing people died because of him. He struggles with the fact that this happens frequently. He doesn't want people to be sacrificed at all. He seeks strength to match Kratos. Like, kind of a theme up until the Tower of Salvation is, Lloyd wants to be as powerful as Kratos. He wants to become stronger, so that he can protect Colette, protect his friends. I'm sorry, these character reviews are probably going to be really quick because it's really late and I'm exhausted and I'm moving back to school tomorrow. And, I might have to do another video for all these guys just to go into more detail, but this might seem a little weak as in comparison to what you'd like and what I'd like. So, Lloyd basically kind of stays the same until he discovers that Colette was suffering the whole time. And that's what tears off Lloyd's mask. Well, at least he had sort of some of it on a little bit beforehand, but that really takes it off. And then you see what he was hiding, his true feelings, and his cliche of being loyal. He cares about Colette, and he hates to see his best friend slowly die and suffer. Because Colette and Genus are his two closest friends ever. And basically his only friends. So, to know that one of his best friends is suffering. Imagine that happening to your best friend. You wouldn't accept that. At least you wouldn't want to accept it. The fact that they have to deal with that. So that's where his mask is removed and he becomes aware of people's suffering. And it's because he is suffering too. And he wants to suffer with them, in a way, he wants to stop their suffering so that they don't have to. But on the inside, he still is. But throughout the game, he tries so hard to grow stronger in order to make peace with that, and to better himself and his friends, so that he can remove suffering from the world and make people's lives better. With his eyes open, Lloyd is accepting to everyone, as seen in the scene with Kate. His being friends with Genus his whole life makes his sense of acceptance much stronger, especially, seen with Kate, because half-elves. His best friend is a half-elf. So Silverant, the world that the party begins in. Silverant and Tetheala, right? So Silverant and Colette both accept suffering and pain as unchanging facts of life. And Lloyd dares to say no. He dares to refuse. Because he believes that there is a way to change it. He believes that there's a way to make everything better for everyone. Yeah, I know, that kind of sounds like Tidus from Final Fantasy X, and that's kind of the point, because for the first third of the game, you think it's a basic, just adventure, save the world story that totally doesn't rip off of Final Fantasy X, and then the Tower of Salvation scene happens, and suddenly it's not, Yeah, it's... So admittedly, trying to get people into this game who've played FF10 is kind of hard, because usually that's one of the first things they notice. But that's the point, because it's the mask of the game, is that it pretends to be a rip-off of the standard story, It pretends to be something that it's not, and then, oh look, the mask is off. This is what's actually going on. So... Lloyd's driving force to try and change the world is what causes the party to join him in his effort. They see in him the ability to make things better. And Lloyd's strength that he develops over time, through both his own efforts and the aid of his friends, inspires the party to overcome their individual struggles. Which especially culminates in the final dungeon. So Lloyd changes the hearts of so many people, just like Mythos did, before the game's events. But unlike Mythos, Lloyd believes in the good of humanity, and that people can change. People can be good. People can be better. Mythos saw the cruelty of people, and changed men's hearts on the inside by forcing them to become something different. Whereas Lloyd does not accept cruelty, nor will he accept using cruelty to make the world better. Lloyd believes that everything that is, everyone that is alive, matters. Shown by both Colette and Kate, and Genus and Rain, and all the party. And he's fighting for all those people and himself so that Colette and both worlds and everyone in the party can live freely. The fighting for the right to life, the refusal to say no, the refusal to just give in, the effort to constantly fight until your last breath for what you truly believe in, is exactly who Lloyd is in a nutshell. When Lloyd is at his lowest, he refuses to accept the suffering that goes on in the world, and he vows to change it. So that's enough about Lloyd, at least for right now. Genus. His cliche is that he's a genius kid. That happens a lot in fiction. His character mask is of a genius elf, and not a half-elf. He hides that. Who is a quiet but loyal friend. He hides his half-elf race and his intolerance. His character themes are intolerance, accepting those who are wrong, and revoking prejudice. Now, Genus is a very, very interesting character in the game. I really like him. there isn't a character in this game that I dislike. Did I say that right? I like every character in the game. So, Genis is, his character development is pretty subtle up until, like, the last few scenes, but he has one of the most interesting arcs in the game. He basically goes full circle, more or less. So, up until the scene at Iselia, Genis, in terms of characterization, is pretty unchanging. He, upon Marble's death, which Genis is responsible for, he murdered his closest friend without knowing that it was her. Well, his closest friend that wasn't Lloyd or Colette. And it's because she was turned into a monster. Genis's hope in humanity and half-elves dies at that moment. Okay, admittedly, I am kind of reading some things I wrote out, but basically, just this is the easiest way to do it, right? So his hope in humanity dies right there, and it takes the entire game to get it back. He hates the horrible things that the designs did to Marble and other humans. He hates the intolerance of the mayor and the citizens of Iselia, and of the mayor's banishing Lloyd. One of the lines Genis says is, "You humans are all the same," which Mythos says at the end game quite frequently. Genis loves his party members as friends, but feels bitterness to humanity as a whole. So Genis's exposure to extreme hate, so quickly at such a young age, instills intolerance and discrimination in his heart, and it takes him the entire game to unlearn that. Because you don't just get hit with watching killing your best friend, and then watching your other best friend be exiled by terrible people. Well, not terrible people, just very angry and intolerant people. You don't just be a victim of intolerance and then not have an emotional whiplash, you know? Genis has a very human reaction. I mean, not human in the setting, I mean human in the real world reaction to the intolerance that goes on. He hates those who cause the intolerance that he hates. It's not so much that he hates the people doing it, he hates the intolerance itself, but the only way he can figure out how to express it is to express hate for those who hate him. That is a very human thing to do, when you really get down to it. It takes a very big level of maturity to accept that it's not just someone, that it's not just some other person having an incorrect view or causing hate or something, and that it's not them as a whole, it's just something they're doing. And instead just see it as being that whole person, or instead just the whole group of people that person might be responsible for. Well, not responsible for, a part of. Sorry, I'm fumbling with my words a lot, so again, just please be patient, because this is who I am. So basically, Genis has a very common reaction to intolerance, is to hate the intolerant. So that's where his character theme of intolerance and accepting those who are wrong come in, because you can't just see someone like Iselia's mayor, who is a complete bigot, and you can't just see that guy and not think that he's a terrible person, you know? But even though he's in the wrong, Genis cannot accept that that despite that, he's still a person that deserves to live, just like he does. It's hard to explain what I'm trying to get at, but it's hard for Genis to accept that even though he's wrong, he still has the same rights as Genis does, and that he still has the same fundamental right to existence, even though he's wrong. You just need to accept that, accept him despite the fact that he's wrong and that he's hateful. So we see the side of the oppressed person in Genus, and his hatred for oppressors is very common in IRL. However, his hatred towards oppressors was towards humans as a whole, and not to specific people, and thus Genus is discriminating against humans. And in that way, he shares a lot of similarities to Mythos, who also hate humans for what they do. They even share the same line. But unlike Mythos, Genus has human friends, and sees just as much good in humanity as he does the bad because of his friends being good people. And by the end, Genus dispels his hatred of humans, for the most part. Not completely, but mostly. In the ending scenes, like right at the epilogue, Genus replaces Lloyd as the spokesperson for equality. Because Lloyd is off gathering all the X-Spheres, Genus travels the world to try and make people accept half-elves more easily. So, it takes the entire game for Genus to find his voice as a harbinger of equality. We see in Genus many different reactions of oppression and intolerance, and his struggle to realize that the actions of the few are not indicative of the intentions and behaviors of the many, which is, again, very, very common. He reacts with many of the different stages of grief throughout the entire game. And at the end of it all, he finally accepts all of it. And at his lowest, Genus is someone who responds to oppressing force with frustration, but lacks the means to stand up to it. Give me 1 second. Alright, that's better. Colette Brunel. She is the cliché mask of a klutzy, innocent moe girl who exists for, usually it's fan service, but you know that kind of image that is very frequent in a lot of different works of fiction or whatever. Her cliché mask is very apparent. Her character mask is of happiness, like I said earlier, and her character themes are revoking an unjust sense of obligation, of failure, and of self-sacrifice. So the pauses were 3 different ones. So Colette spent her entire life knowing that she was the chosen and that she existed in order to die. Can you imagine that from as early as you remember, you were being told that you exist solely to die for the world? Think about that. And Colette's 16, so she isn't very old. And Genus is 12, I forgot to mention. Colette is told that she exists to die, to make the world better. And she accepts it without hesitation, fear, or questioning. She's just like, yes, alright, I will die for the world. I will do what is right, because this is my duty as the chosen of Mana. I need to make the world a better place, and it's on my shoulders to do it, and I don't care what it takes. I have to die for the world to make it better. So in a way, she knows that she's worth more dead than alive. Could you imagine what that must feel like? To know that you are worth more dead than alive? That your entire life you're told that you're going to die, and that your entire life significance is that you're going to die. Imagine what that would do to someone. And yet she hides it all. She hides all that despair and anger and frustration behind a mask of happiness. With the lighthearted laugh and say, no, it's okay, I'm fine. When she is suffering and afraid and lonely on the inside. She hides her angel transformation and struggles from her friends. Like I mentioned, simply because she wants her friends to be happy while they're on that journey. Colette wants to do everything she can to make people happy, even if it means neglecting suffering that needs attention, her own suffering. Even if it means believing everything is her fault and taking blame for things she didn't do, even if it means her death. I know, I'm sorry I'm getting depressing, because Colette is not a depressing character at all. She just has a very depressing theme to her. And I like Colette a lot. I actually, in the beginning, I liked Colette for all the wrong reasons, because all I saw was the mask, and then I kind of, like, got neutral, and now I like her for all the right reasons. After the Tower of Salvation, where Colette becomes a mindless husk, instead of her saving the world, the party saves her. Because after they learn what happens with the ritual of regeneration, the party refuses to let Colette die. She accepted death with open arms, and it's the party who says no. It's everyone that she loves that won't allow her to die. So when the party saves Colette from her Crucius crystal causing the mindless husk thing, she develops Chronic Angelus Crystallis and Officium, the crystallization body thing. You actually see part of it in game where Colette's shirt, like her shirt sleeve gets ripped and you see her entire shoulder is covered in like these green scaly looking shards of glass. It's actually really creepy. And again, Colette hides her suffering to make people happy, to make people not worry about her. She keeps neglecting the importance of her suffering, because that's all she's known. That's all she was ever taught. Because she believed that her suffering was her duty. She believed that her suffering... She was told her entire life that she needed to suffer, that it was her job to suffer, because she's the chosen. And she accepted that. And so, you don't just forget that in a day. So that's Colette's struggle the entire game, is to hide her suffering. And it takes Lloyd and the rest of the party to convince her that her life is worth saving. And that she deserves to live. And she deserves to be free from all this suffering that is following her. And then that does mean that she then struggles with feeling like a failure. Because she's unable to save the world because of her death, for dying for it. And with her friends constantly saving her, she feels like a failure to them. And what's interesting, though, is that culminates at about halfway through the second disc. Because everybody throughout the entire game is telling her that no matter what happens to her or who she is, that she is still herself. When Lloyd finds out that Kratos is his dad, spoiler alert again, Colette is the one that tells Lloyd everything he told her throughout the entire game. That no matter what happens, no matter who his dad is, he is still him, and nothing can change that. And the fact that Colette is the one to give that strength to her friends when they are weak in that moment, and remind them who they are, and their strengths, and their tensions they've always had, that shows Colette has come a long way since the beginning. She goes from a weak child who entirely depended on people, to a strong woman who, even though she's still supported by her friends, no longer needs their constant support in order to function. At her lowest, we see Colette be someone who is submissive and accepts whatever is put upon her. Okay, enough of Colette. Kratos. Alright. His cliché mask and character mask are the same thing, of being a mysterious swordsman, and he's hiding the true motives. He's hiding his ulterior motives of being a part of Crucius. So his character themes are, is he an enemy or an ally? And also this one crops up at the end, if he's the theme of, do you side with your friend despite their unjust actions, or do you oppose your friend to do what is right? In the beginning of the game, you know basically nothing about Kratos, that he's a mercenary to protect Colette, and he has a thing against Lord Kavar, one of the Design Grand Cardinals, and that's it. once the Tower of Salvation scene happens, you see Kratos, he's an angel. And then you see a new mask, that he's an angel of Crucius, that he's a bad guy. And that's his new mask. So you see him as an enemy. You discriminate against him that he is an enemy. And then you fight him and he wipes the floor with you, like I said earlier. So then, throughout basically the entire game, you regard him as an enemy. But when in actuality, he's working behind the scenes to aid the party. There's one scene when you go to Cyback when you're trying to save Kate. Wait, no, not Cyback. In Mel Tokyo when you're trying to save Kate from execution. Kratos comes out of nowhere and asks Briseia if there's sacred wood in the church. And he says... And it's revealed later that the sacred wood he was looking for was to forge the Ring of the Pact with Origin, so Lloyd could use the Eternal Sword. So, despite his questionable alignment shifting throughout the game, he has never seemed to be outright evil. He is just questionable. And as the game progresses, Kratos sees that Lloyd actually really can do something about the terrible world system that vies for mana, that forces people to suffer, that causes famine, and you got the point. So, Kratos wants to help Lloyd change the world, because he sees that Lloyd's new course of action is the right course of action. And so he works undercover against Crucius. And this is significant, because Kratos is Mythos' companion. Mythos and Lord Yggdrasil are the same guy. So 4,000 years ago, Mythos, Kratos, Ewan, and Martel all journeyed the world to try and stop a giant war between two kingdoms. And Kratos taught Mythos. Mythos was Kratos' apprentice. So Kratos was at Mythos' side for 4,000 years. And the reason he lived that long is because Crucius crystals stop the body's aging. Again, explain it and move on. That's how the angels have lived for so long. And how it also affects Briseia, but I'll get into that later. Well, there is, since Kratos is Lloyd's father, he was in love with a woman named Anna, who was a victim of Crucius crystal research by Lord Kavar. And that's how she corrupted into a and she basically had the same thing Marble did, where she became a monster because of her crystal, and then Kratos had to kill her. So Kratos has to deal with a lot of heavy stuff. And in terms of my analysis of him, just talking right now, that I really don't have enough time to cover the thing with Anna, but and there's not a lot of detail about it either. But the point is, Kratos was loyal to Mythos for 4,000 years, and then Lloyd came along and proved that he can change the world that Mythos has created. And Kratos sees Lloyd's determination and for once realizes how Mythos is wrong in what he's doing. And by the end game, Kratos fights Lloyd so that Lloyd can make the pact and use the Eternal Sword. And Kratos is completely at Lloyd's side at that point. Kratos is fighting with Lloyd, especially if you get his friendship scene, in which case he joins you in the final dungeon. And at the end game, he goes to Deris Karlan to destroy all of the X-Spheres so that they may never affect people's lives again. And Lloyd is collecting the X-Spheres in the new world. So, just like Lloyd, Kratos cleans up his mistakes and makes the world a much better place. Alright, let's talk about Rain. Alright, I really like Rain. She is really good. She's a great character. Her cliché mask is of the motherly figure, of the stern guardian. Her character mask is of the mature adult, because she hides in that she hides her true feelings of the world. Her character themes are of accepting oneself and fighting for equality. Rain really doesn't develop that much until you hit Cyback, where it's shown that she's a half-elf. And from there on out, Rain struggles with her identity as a half-elf and struggles with accepting and loving herself. Admittedly, I don't have that much to talk about with Rain, which is a shame because I really like her. She sees in Lloyd someone that can make the world better. And Lloyd's her student and she's his teacher. She supports him in any way she can. And in some ways, she sees Lloyd more mature than her. I don't have any examples, but if you play the game, you can kind of see that in some ways. And it's also, she begins to see that Lloyd is her voice, in a way. Because Lloyd has the right and the privilege, as a human, to challenge the system. Whereas if she, being a half-elf, tried to challenge the system, she would be executed immediately. In the second game, Lloyd is basically Rain's voice, and he says everything that she wants to say. But she's silent because she has to be the mother for Genus, be the adult, and because she can't, because of the fact that she's a half-elf. And she despises that. And she works to accept that. And her intent to change the world and her acceptance of herself culminates towards the end, particularly in the third to last dungeon, where everyone is the Hall of the Great Seed, where you go after Colette, and then you see Martel for the first time. Where, in order to let the party proceed, she's standing on a collapsing platform, and she says one of the best lines in the entire game. I believe in your ideals, a world that would accept those of us caught in the middle. I believe in your vision of the world. It has become my hope. I came all the way here in order to realize that dream. I've no regrets. My soul will go on in the world you create, but if your ideals die, then my hope dies as well. Living on without hope is worse than death, don't you think? If you don't understand, then make use of your remaining life to think about what it means for a person to live. That's my final lesson to you as your teacher. Now go. Do as your teacher says. The rest is in your hands, my precious student. That shows Rain perfectly. That she is willing to go so far and willing to die for what she believes in and hopes for. That the world can be a good place. That she wants to believe that people are fundamentally good at heart. To believe that people can change. And up until that scene, she did not believe that at all. Her faith in humanity and her acceptance of herself peaks at the last dungeon, where she admits she is glad she was born a half-elf, and that she believes people can change, no matter how long it takes. And then Rain travels with Genus at the end to build acceptance of half-elves and help make the world better in the way she can. And that's Rain. Shina Fujibayashi. Oh yeah, I forgot to do everyone's last names. Lloyd Irving, Colette Brunel, Genus and Rain Sage, and Kratos Orion. And now Shina Fujibayashi. Hold on. Oh wow, it's getting late. Alright, let's try to plow through this. Okay. Sheena has the cliche mask of a tsundere girl. And her character, if you go look that up if you don't know what it is, it's hard to explain. And she has a character mask of both the assassin in the beginning until she joins the party, and of pure determination. So she hides everything behind her determination. Her character themes are overcoming failure and self-actualization. So Sheena lives in a very small village of Mizuho. In part of her ninja training, she tried to make a pact with Volt, the summoned spirit of lightning. and failed, killing a whole bunch of people, including Kuchinawa's parents, which he never forgave her for. I mentioned that earlier. So then, in order to seek forgiveness for that, and as part of her training, she makes up for it by traveling across the dimensional barrier that separates Tethe'ala from Sylvarant, and to assassinate Colette so that the ritual of regeneration is never completed in Sylvarant, and thus Tethe'ala is not put in mana decline, and Tethe'ala can continue to prosper. After joining the party, and, well, thus failing twice, because she joins the party and then stays to help Colette to save both worlds, and because she failed with the pact with Volt, so, yeah, twice. She returns to Mizuho with the party, where she discovers she needs to make a pact with Volt in order to make the Riards work. Now, her best friend, Corinne, dies from Volt's attack. I mentioned that earlier. Corinne was a crutch for Sheena for basically the entire game up to that point. Corinne's death shows that... Well, first off, Corinne was her only friend until the party. Up until that scene, really. And then, Corinne dying for her shows her that Corinne isn't her only friend. That everyone in the party is her friend. And that she's not a failure. And that she's better than she thinks she is. And so she fights Volt and wins in order to overcome her past failure. And all of this, up until the end of the first disc, the game basically revolves around her and her ability to form pacts with the summon spirits to gain their power. And even though it's strange to have just like one character be the focus, Sheena deserved to have the focus be on her in that time. Because, well, one, no one else could make pacts except for her. But two, because it means that she's growing and she's self-actualizing. And she becomes the heart of the group. She becomes the figurehead of the group. It had to be Sheena, because Sheena meant the party's unity meant so much to her, and she needed them. And alongside them, she grows, and she's, like I said, self-actualizes, and she becomes stronger. And now she's the core of everyone. And where she was once a failure, she is now succeeding. Finally. At overcoming her fear and of her past. And overcoming her past. And she's starting anew and growing constantly. Her growth culminates in the side quest where you fight Kuchinawa in the one-on-one duel. And that personally allows her to overcome the grudge she bore for causing so much death in her town. That helps her cope. She never forgets Corinne's sacrifice for her, and Corinne lives on in her heart. And you really see that by the end because of just what she does with the party. That's Sheena right there. Growth and overcoming your past failure and succeeding. Alright, Zealous Wilder. I'm getting really tired. I should plow through this. Alright, we've only got a few left. Zealous Wilder. His cliche mask is of a floozy and a flirt. His character mask is actually of the same thing. And he's hiding his ulterior motives of betrayal and his frustration with being the chosen. There is so much I could say about Zelos, and unfortunately I'm not knowledgeable enough, because Zelos is basically a book in and of himself, but it's late, I'm exhausted, and I can't really bring myself to do that, so, also I just can't really pick, his character development is very subtle, it's very subtle writing, so I lose quite a lot of it, even if I try to capture it all. Anyways, his character themes are of rebellion. And if your desires are more important than the needs of the many. Now, Zelos is the chosen of Tetheala. There's one on the Prospering World, too. And, he, like Colette, was told his entire life that he was, going to die. That he had to die to make the world better. And that was his only function. And unlike Colette, who said yes and didn't hesitate, Zelos said no. Zelos refused to die. Zelos refused to accept his role as chosen. And he unfortunately spent his whole life being only seen for the fact that he is a chosen. Up until he joins the party, and even then, basically up until, like, the second half of the second disc, so, like, the last 5 hours of the game, there is no one in his life that cares about him as a person. His sister, his butler, the royal family, the church, they don't care. They only care that he is the chosen. His title as the chosen gets in his way in every aspect of his life. He just wants to live and enjoy himself and have fun. But the chosen can't do that. So he openly refuses his role constantly. So he becomes a flirt and a party animal because he can't cope and because that's what he wants to do, and partly because he's depressed as all heck. And it's just... he struggles a lot on the inside, and he hides it behind his whimsical, smiling attitude. Just like Colette. So Zelos joins the party, and he's relatively quiet and doesn't change much unless you're doing the field skits to raise his friendship level. And then when he betrays the party, spoiler, and turns Colette over to Crucius, Crucius promised him that he would be rid of the title of Chosen. This is a revelation to me, because it's very alluded to in the game. Probably the most foreshadowed thing in the game, honestly. And it takes up until that point for him to go through with it. Hold on. This is killing my throat because I'm exhausted and it's making my throat hurt. Now, depending on your actions in the game, Zelos' betrayal ends in 2 ways. The first is every way, unless you choose Kratos as the friendship thing. Zelos reads that the party, he sees the subtleties in everyone's actions, that the party does in fact care about him as a person, does love him, and wants him to be there with him. Which is when Zelos uses the betrayal as an excuse to get the... It's called Aeonis. It's never mentioned in a voiced scene, unfortunately, so I have no idea how to pronounce it, but basically it's a thing that will allow Lloyd to use the Eternal Sword. Yes, it's a key element in order to allow him to do that. If you choose Kratos in the friendship scene, Zelos doesn't see the party cares about him. He thinks that they want to be rid of him and would be better off without him. And then you fight him and kill him on the spot. And then you go and save Colette. If he lives, which 7 out of 8 times he will, Zelos tells the party that he did all that he did the betrayal as a lie in order to help everyone. And for the first time in his life, he finally sees that people care about him. Excuse me. And that he finally has friends who like him for who he is, and not just for his title. He comes to terms with his role as the Chosen by the final dungeon, and he refuses to accept Mythos' offer to revoke his Chosen status, because he finally accepts who he is and what he cannot change. He finally accepts himself as a person. That's Zelos. The personal struggle of identity, and of finding who your real friends are. Okay, Presea Combateer. I really like Presea. I like every character in this game. So her cliché mask is of a creepy and emotionless girl. That's basically a given, right off the bat. Her character mask is of a young child, and she's hiding her real age, which is 28, you find out at the end of the game. Spoiler alert. And she lost 16 years of aging to her Crucius Crystal. Her character themes are time, the ethics of immortality, and punishment and reconciliation. When the party meets Presea, she is emotionless and unresponsive, and she doesn't say much. When the party is arrested and thrown in jail, so a little bit later, she doesn't really develop until then. They meet Kate, where they learn that Kate would cause Presea to have a Crucius Crystal grow in her body, because that was the research she was told to do by the Pope, because her dad... Oh, yeah, I'll talk about Kate after these, by the way, because she's my favorite. My favorite NPC, aside from the antagonist. Where she's basically growing a Crucius Crystal in her body, which causes her emotionlessness and her lack of aging. So that locked her body at the age of 12 for 16 years. And thus that makes her immortal, but unaware of basically everything, because she's a lifeless being. When the party finally fixes her key crest so the Crucius Crystal isn't parasitic anymore, she basically wakes up and realizes who she is and what she's been doing. And that's when she really opens up to the party, where you learn that her parents died, that she learned how to be a woodsman in order to fill in for her sick dad, and then was given for the Crucius Crystal research testing by order of the Pope in the game in order to help out her family. And when the party visits her sister's grave, Alicia's grave, Presea wants to punish the one who murdered her sister. And then she finds out it's Regal. Spoiler alert again. I'll get into that later. But Presea can't quite forgive Regal yet. She holds a grudge against him, even knowing the circumstances that caused Regal to kill her. She cannot forgive him until the final dungeon. Just because knowing she's working with a murderer that killed her sister, is too painful for her to accept. Now, in the final dungeon, she and Regal see an illusion of Alicia. Presea tries to protect the illusion, thinking it's the real Alicia, doubting its truth. Well, not thinking, but doubting whether it's true or not, and wants to figure it out first. Regal knows it is, and he wants to destroy it. Presea, protecting the illusion, will basically try and stop Regal if he tries to hurt the illusion. So, if Lloyd did not intervene at that moment, Presea or Regal probably would have killed each other. And thanks to Lloyd's intervention, Presea finally manages to forgive Regal for what he did. Now, because Presea's Crucius Crystal stopped her aging to stop, it locked her at the age of 12 for 16 years. When she's freed from the crystal's power, thanks to the party, she realizes she lost 16 years of her life because of being a lifeless vessel. It's not that she obviously lived during that time, but she wasn't aging with everyone. She never knew her sister died. She was basically in cryosleep for that time, more or less. So she spends a long time coping with the fact that she lost all that time without being able to live and function as a person should. And that makes her oppose all X-Spheres and Crucius Crystals, and makes her take revenge on Rhode Island Varliet. And at the end of the game, she finally manages to stop living in the past and being tormented by her past and the fact that she lost that time. And begins to move forward as a new person, and with new opportunities. That's Presea. She struggles with forgiving those who wrong her and accepting what was done to her. And at the end, finally being able to forgive and accept, and move on, and make her life better. Alright, one more for the main party. Regal Bryant. I really like Regal. I don't care what anyone says. A lot of people are either neutral to him or just like, eh. But I like Regal. I'm gonna stick up for this guy if I have to. Even if I'm gonna be the only guy. Alright, his cliche mask is of the stoic and mysterious type. And his character mask is of being a mysterious criminal, because he's hiding his crime and his feelings. His character themes are of forgiving oneself, atonement, and time, just like Brisea's. When the party meets Regal, he is at his lowest. I want you to imagine someone who thinks dirt is better than him. He believes that he is so not worth anything, that he is such a terrible person, that he doesn't care if the party kills him as soon as they see him. He cannot forgive himself or let things go, and he hates himself for what he did. He doesn't change much until the scene at Alicia's grave, where he tells the party what happened. He killed Alicia, Brisea's sister. Alicia was his lover. And Regal was originally the owner of a really big company that was, I believe, a tourist company. It's actually not really well explained. I guess it's mining and resource management and also tourism. I don't know. I feel like it's mostly for the construction for the tourist city. And so that's why they have the mines and everything. So he was in love with her as the owner, and then Regal's business partner George forced them apart. And then Alicia was handed over for Crucius Crystal research, just like Brisea. And when Regal did everything he could to get her back, paid off Farley, bribed him, basically, Farley took off her Crucius Crystal and forced her to become a monster. And Regal had to kill her with his own hands. And he says, there's like a little flashback scene, and he says, I could never kill you. Alicia says, Master, please kill me. And he says, I could never kill you with my own hands. And she says, it's because I love you so much that I want you to do it. It's because I love you that I want you to kill me and give me mercy. So he did. And he was never able to forgive himself for what happened. And so he turned himself into prison as a murderer. Went to prison for however many years. And then the party finds him. Regal vows to never use his hands for violence again, so he's constantly wearing handcuffs. So even in-game, his sprites and animations all revolve around him and his hands being bound, so it actually looks pretty cool if you watch the way he moves. So, the party takes him hostage in order to figure out what's going on with him, because he notices, the first time he encounters them, he sees Brisea, and he sees in her Alicia's eyes, because they're related, and then he runs away, and then he encounters the party again. He finds them because he wants to talk to Brisea, and then they fight him. And then they take him hostage, and they just want to know what he has with Brisea. So, when Regal tells everyone, he then works to forgive himself for what happened, because Alicia forgives him. Alicia, being in the Crucius Crystal, can still tell him, can still communicate in a way, but not very well. But she tells him that she forgives him, and that he needs to forgive himself, and that Brisea needs to forgive him. And at the final dungeon, he is forgiven by Brisea, and found redemption and forgiveness. And then he forgives himself. And he lost all those years to his voluntary imprisonment. He lost all that time, hence the theme of time. And he uses his new freedom at the end of the game to better the world and use his company to rebuild the world and to destroy the X-spheres that he can find. Alright, I just want to talk about these two side characters for a bit. Kate and the Pope. These two sum up the racism and injustice aspect of the game perfectly. Alright. Kate is the first half-elf NPC the party encounters in Tethe'alla, and the first example of discrimination. Like I said, if a half-elf commits any crime, they are executed. Almost all half-elves in Tethe'alla either live in one room and do slave labor their entire life, and be treated with horrible conditions, are on the run and live out in the wilderness, living day by day, and if they get caught, they get executed. in jail awaiting execution, or on the floating city of Exire if they even manage to get that far. Kate lives in a basement of the Imperial Research Academy. She knows nothing outside that room. She has never left it. Think about that. Think about living your entire life in just one room. You never see the sun, ever. Think about what that would do to you. So when the party meets her, she tells them that they should never have thrown their privilege away for being born human. When the party learns about Perseia's Crucis crystal that Kate created, Lloyd asks her how she could treat someone so terribly. She responds... Sorry, my throat's starting to hurt. She responds with, I should ask you the same thing. How can humans treat half-elves like you do? And this is where we see the goodness in Lloyd's heart, when he says, I treat them the same as everyone else. And for the first time, Kate sees a genuinely good-hearted human. Someone who doesn't hate her for something she can't change. She then lets the party escape, and then later, when they return to Meltokio, they learn that she's been branded a criminal and is going to be executed. Or they save her and bring her to Ozette, and then she tells them that her father is the Pope, and that's why she did the experiment on Perseia. Because the Pope ordered it, and she felt like she could finally be useful to her dad. Think about that. That you are so despised by your parents that committing atrocious acts upon innocent people is the only hope you have of getting even the slightest shred of dignity out of your parents. Think about that. Unfortunately, that's the scene, that's where seeing Kate stops in the game. But her introducing the racism is very invaluable, and she's one of my favorite characters. On the second disc, you encounter the Pope in the game, and he doesn't have a name again, where the party asks him why he treats half-elves so terribly, especially since he has a daughter who's a half-elf. He tells them that he is afraid of the fact that he grows older, but his daughter does not. Half-elf aging and maturing scares him, and he fears their race and thus orders them all to be shunned. He says one of the most impacting lines in the game. Those who are different must be eliminated. What's scary is that there are so many people in the real world just like this guy. So many people think that way. It takes a... and the fact that they had that scene with the Pope in the game there, is... I'm really glad they did that, because it really shows... The two of them contrast each other so well, because on Kate's side you have the oppressed, and on the Pope's in the game's side you have the oppressor. And they offer two different, very interesting perspectives. And the Pope's words, in a way you can see what he means, that he's afraid of that he ages but half-elves don't. But that still doesn't excuse what he does. You know? That is... I don't even have words for the things that he does. That is inexcusable. And I don't really have much else to say, otherwise I'd be saying the same things over and over again. But they basically embody the point of the game, more or less. Alright, let me finish up with my little wrap-up here. So I already talked about the music, just check it out. All the character themes, Deepest Woods, Final Dungeon songs, just, it's great. The Final Dungeon. Okay, so Tales of Symphonia's Final Dungeon is very interesting, because it's kind of like in between two dungeons of other games. In Final Fantasy IV, you have the typical epic dungeon. The music's like epic and awesome, and you fight really hard monsters, and it's long and difficult, and just yes, epic. In Final Fantasy X, all this talking is making my throat hurt. In Final Fantasy X, it goes weird, and then more weird, and then you fight a boss that doesn't make sense, and then you're in a city somewhere. Mind you, you're in a giant whale monster. Spoiler alert. And then you're in a tower collecting crystals, and then you float into the sky, and then fight this giant demon thing, and then you're on a floating sword fighting a tick. Like, what? Anyway, so you got epic, and you got weird. Tales of Symphonia is right here. It's right in the middle. Darus Carlon is right in the middle. Darus Carlon is the homeland of the elves, and it's basically a ruined kingdom floating in a vast expanse of nothing. So when you teleport on there, you're standing on these platforms of a ruined civilization, and there's magic symbols and everything all over them. They look really cool. And in the background, you've got swirling purple and black clouds, and you've got this haunting song that plays in time with your running speed. So it looks like you're running to the beat of the song. And the atmosphere in that place is ridiculous. Now, the Tales series, I don't know if it's a series-wide thing, but of the ones I've played, they have the final dungeon, you have the first half, and then you can either cut right to the final boss or do an optional second half. So the first half is what I was just talking about. There's just these long platforms of nothing, and you're just walking in this vast expanse of emptiness, and it feels lonely and depressing because you would expect the epic dungeon, you'd expect the amazing over-the-top thing, but it's not. It's quiet. It's haunting. I keep saying that word. It's almost disturbing in a way, to know that you are standing on a place that is older than the world, actually. And I really don't have much else to say about that. The first half is really cool. It's kind of like a sort of maze, but not really. And then the party disappears, and then Lloyd's on his own. And then that's where you get all those epic scenes that I was kept mentioning, where Genis and Rain everyone confronts an illusion of their greatest fears, where Genis and Rain confront the mayor in Virginia of their oppressors and deal with racism. Sheena and Zelos confront illusions of Kuchino and Celis, of his sister, to deal with their failure. And Persei and Regal deal with their inability to forgive, atone, and move forward. They're all amazing scenes, and they're some of the best in the game. Now, the second half of the dungeon is entirely optional. You step into Vinheim Castle, and the music is just epic. There's drums in the background. It's fast-paced. It's a remix of the first half's theme, except fast and epic and guitar, and it's like, yeah, it pushes you forward. It feels like you just went through you went through a very long adventure, and here you are at the end, doing the final push until the end. Now, the second half is entirely optional. You can go right up the stairs, fight a dragon, and then go through the door to the final boss without even touching that area. But if you do, and you solve the optional puzzle, and the enemies are hard, and it takes a long time to do, you get an item that allows you to go to the game's optional dungeon, which is a pure challenge. That's only if you're looking for a challenge. So the final dungeon is really cool. It's unlike anything I've seen. It doesn't really leave much in terms of a dungeon, because the focus is on the story there. But that's fine, because it's actually a really cool area. I like it. Alright, final boss. Now let's just say it. Mythos is pathetic. I'm sorry. He is completely weak. He was such an epic antagonist and built up to be world-endingly powerful, and then you wipe the floor with him, really. his first form, this is the only game I've ever seen where the boss's final form is easier than the first. It is his last stand, so admittedly the first form does make sense that, yes, he's trying very hard to take you down. In lore, it makes sense that you already took everything away from him. He is completely alone at that point. He doesn't have the Eternal Sword, he doesn't have his allies, it's just him. That said, he hits you hard with a lot of attacks, he teleports around, he hits you with very quick spells that are really powerful. It's memorable, and it's a good fight, but it feels like it could have been just a little bit more. For the first form, anyways. The second form, it could have been a lot more. The second form is so much easier, which is a shame. Mythos fights you in a pocket plane with a really cool background and environment that you fight him in, and he's in this giant armor suit that's comprised of these optional bosses that you can fight in the final dungeon, which I'd recommend doing. They're not that hard, they're actually really easy. And it looks epic, and he looks really cool in his armor, and it's awesome, and the music sounds great, and it's so cool, and then you kill him in a minute. I am sorry. You wipe the... I already said this, but you decimate him in no time in the second form. It's a complete joke. Which is weird, because he hits you with even more powerful spells than the first form. But what makes it so easy is that, despite him hitting harder, he is such a larger target because of the giant armor suit. He doesn't teleport. He flinches faster than the first form. Which means it takes fewer hits to make him unable to act and retaliate. And for all the times I've played through the game, I don't even think he overlimits in that form. Overlimit being... Oh, right, I forgot to talk about overlimits in the gameplay section. If you take enough damage, you'll enter overlimit where you won't flinch from attacks, so you can just keep attacking and raging and comboing, and you'll take half damage all the time. It's very annoying because bosses do it way more than you ever get to, and there actually isn't that much aside from just you don't flinch and you can just keep attacking even though you're being hit. So I don't think he overlimits at all. So all that thrown together makes him extremely easy, so you just keep stun-locking him and comboing him, and then he's unable to fight back, and you just decimate him. It's a real shame, because it looks like it would have been a great fight if it didn't have those problems. But, oh well, the music and the bosses are definitely awesome. Easier than it should be, but it's still a good fight. Alright. This is something I've been dancing around the entire time because I wanted to save this one for last. The villain. Mythos Yggdrasil. He is one of the best antagonists I've ever seen. Unfortunately, he has the Sephiroth effect in that you don't really see much of him until the endgame. You hear about him a lot, but you don't really see him. And, basically Mythos was a half-elf who lived in Heimdall, the village of the elves. Same place where Genis and Rain lived, and they were kicked out. So Mythos is kicked out with his sister. You can see that there's so many parallels with Mythos and all the main characters. That's why he's so good, because he's the perfect contrast to all of them. So, Mythos encounters racism his entire life because he's a half-elf and gets kicked out of his hometown. And just like Lloyd and Genis, too. And joins up with his friends, Ewan and Kratos. And they journey to end discrimination and hatred, just like the player party. And just like the player party, Martel gets sick from her crucius crystal, like Colette, and gets cured. Somewhere along the line, Martel dies. It doesn't really explain that. That pushes Mythos completely over the edge, because Mythos was already completely unstable already, because of all the hatred he faced, all of the cruelty he faced, all of the violence he faced. And that causes him to hate humans entirely. Everyone. Anyone that is a human he hates immediately. He frequently says in game, "You humans are all the same," just like Gina says at the beginning. So Mythos makes pacts with the summoned spirits and Origin to create the Eternal Sword. Oh, and at the time that Mythos was alive, this was 4,000 years before the events of the game, by the way. There is a war between two kingdoms at the time, who are fighting with Magi technology, which drains the world's mana, and kills the giant tree of mana. So with the Eternal Sword, Mythos stops the war by taking the great seed of the giant tree, splitting the worlds in half, having the worlds vie for the little mana left in the great seed so that Magi technology is never created again. Fuses Martel's Crucius crystal with the great seed so that her life will be preserved within the crystal and he might find a way to save her. Then Mythos controls the world via Crucius and the Designs, so that, and which has the Church of Martel deify his sister, so that way the Chosen of Regeneration journey can happen in order to create a new vessel for Martel. The first third of the game feels like a completely different game compared to the rest of it. So Mythos, using the power of the Eternal Sword, locks Darris-Karlan next to the world, like I said, how I said earlier. And the Comet is the homeland of the elves, and Mythos builds a new world, a world of lifeless beings on there. Those who use Crucius crystals to become emotionless angels. Mythos, at his core, wants the same thing as Lloyd. He wants to make the world free of discrimination, but instead of hoping in humanity, Mythos hoping in the heart of people, Mythos cannot hope. He cannot love. He is so broken, so over the edge, that he cannot bring himself to trust anyone. And so the only way he can trust anyone to be good and not hate and not discriminate is to change everyone's fundamental nature, to make them all lifeless, and to make every single person the same. This is kind of like a very big, I guess this is a big philosophical issue, I don't really know, but basically the issue of would making everyone the exact same with everything, just everything, every person on Earth is the exact same. Would that still fix all the issues with discrimination and hatred? I don't really know. And that's why I love this game, because this game is nothing but gray. And it makes you think about this. So, Mythos makes human lives into a hive mind, where no one has emotions and thus no hate, and all become the same race and mindset, and thus there is no hatred or discrimination. They remain like this forever, because they are immortal. But imagine that. You are an emotionless entity. You cannot eat, sleep, breathe, feel anything tactile, taste, smell. All you have is sight and sound for senses, which are very crisp and clear, by the way, much beyond human capability. And then all you can really do, because you're not really a human, you don't really have any desires because you don't have any physical ones, so thus why would you need anything? Why would you need like mental or emotional desires? Because you can't feel any emotions, so why would you need emotional desires? So you don't need love or compassion or anything. So you don't really need you don't really have mental desires for acceptance of other people and being accepted and having friends and discussions and listening to music and enjoying art. You don't really need any of that anymore because you don't care. So what do? You just fly around for forever. Would that be better? Because when you really think about the terrible things that humanity does, is that better though? Because then you don't have any of those terrible things anymore. You have a true neutral society. Would that be better? There wouldn't be any hate, but there also wouldn't be any love. There wouldn't be any love that makes being alive, that makes suffering the mundanity of life, dealing with the endless pain, depression, suffering, and hardship. Love and compassion and friendship make going through all that worth it. So would it truly be better in a world without hate, but also a world without love? Would it? I don't know. I really don't. I have debated this issue for, well, by the time I realized it, I was a lot older, so maybe about like 5 years. Alright, let's go with that. 5 years. And I still don't know. I've been thinking about this not nonstop, but on and off for a very long time, and will continue to do so. I, for one, am an emotional person, and I would not want to, even though that has caused a lot of issues with being able to just live, I don't think I would want to give that up. So sorry for that little tangent, but let's get back to the reviewing Mythos there. Crucius crystals are made from human lives, so that means that in order to create a world of lifeless entities that just fly around for the rest of forever, he has to kill half the world to turn the other half immortal. Oh look, I left a little note for myself to be able to write about all that. But really, I mean, even though I was saying, would it be better for either way? It ends the hatred of man. I mean, but you aren't enjoying life anymore. You just exist. That's it. You just exist. You don't live. This is why Mythos is such a great antagonist, because he's not a villain. He is gray. He's not evil, nor is he good. He's gray. Just as Lloyd's intentions are gray. Even though the game roots for Lloyd and makes you support him, Lloyd's efforts to reunite the world and grow the Great Seed and make the world a better place for everyone. His stance on the discrimination issue is that he hopes that people will change. He has hope. He's going off a faint promise that things will be better. Mythos has results. Mythos knows that doing what he is doing will end hate. But Lloyd doesn't. Lloyd is just going off a false promise, and is trying to make everyone have a right to life. But that may very well change nothing. It might change something, but it might change nothing. At least Mythos has results. Mythos has been able to make a world free of hate. Also a world free of love. But there is no violence, because no one has need for violence. And there is no hate, because there is no need for hate. Because everyone is the same, everyone doesn't care about anything. Because with Mythos' world, the hate's gone. But I don't know. I'm just gonna stop here. Mythos did all that to end racism and to revive his sister. Even as the party intervenes and tells them everything that they want, he can't believe them. He can't trust in their hope, because he doesn't have hope anymore. Up until the very end, he cannot hope in people. When he's defeated on his deathbed, Mythos says one of the best lines in the game. Farewell, my shadow, you who stand on the end of the path that I have chosen not to follow. I wanted my own world, so I don't regret my choice. I would make the same choice all over again. I will continue to choose this path. Even in the last seconds of his life, he truly believed that what he was doing was right. That's Mythos. Someone who will take something so far to be able to bring his sister back to life and to make the world free of hate, and willing to go to an extreme, cruel, terrible way in order to make a result happen by changing humans as they are inside, changing them into nothings. And at the end of the game, I said, if you remember, one of my themes was that you are not alone. Well, one of the game's themes. Every single person has someone, except Mythos. By about halfway through the game, Kratos and Ewan. Well, Ewan has been working against Mythos for a while. One of the Desians doesn't want to deal with him, Rodile. Some of them are trying to back him up on that. And Kratos, halfway through, says, alright, I'm joining Lloyd. He knows what he's doing. And then all Mythos has is no one. He has Pronema, who then dies. He kills her. Because clearly she didn't mean that much to him, you know. And then Martel revives, and she cannot stand what he did. And he says something. He completely misinterprets everything she says, because for 4,000 years, he has become obsessed with the idea of Martel, and not Martel herself. He doesn't even remember who his sister was. He doesn't even remember what she said to him. Because he is so far gone that he can't live any other way. That's all. He has become so low, so grounded in his efforts, that he can't find any other way out. So Martel rejects him in a way, because she's trying to make it clear to him, you need to stop what you're doing. And again, he misinterprets it. So at the end of the game, he has no one. Powerless, because he doesn't have the Eternal Sword. All the Desians are gone. All the Grand Cardinals are gone. The only people left are angels floating around Darris Carlon for no reason. He is truly alone. There is no one there for him. But at the end of the game, he redeems himself. Because like all people, he finds redemption. And I didn't pick this up until the last time I played this. In the last scene, when the party's trying to restore the Great Seed, well, after Mythos dies, the shards of his Crucius Crystal enter Lloyd's X-Sphere. And then when he's trying to restore the Great Seed and he's flying up in the air, because his X-Sphere is a Crucius Crystal, actually. They don't really explain that, and then suddenly he has wings. He's up in the air, and then the giant sparkles come out of his X-Sphere. That's Mythos. That's Mythos' Crucius Crystal. That's his mana there. And him doing that is what allows the Great Seed to survive long enough to allow them to germinate the Great Seed and make it into the giant tree. Mythos' life and power allowed the giant tree to be reborn, and thus Mythos was reborn within it. And at the end of the final cutscene, when Lloyd decides to name the new tree, the tree that will be the link to all those that live, even though it's not stated outright, Lloyd names the new tree Yggdrasil, after the one who first sought a world free of hate, where all could live freely. That's Mythos. a whole bunch of gray. Alright, I think I'm finally done. Thank you for listening. This game has shaped my life in so many different ways. And I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be as... My life wouldn't have been... How do I put this? I wouldn't be who I am without this game. And it means so much to me, and it has changed my life in so many ways. It's a game that, on multiple times, has effectively talked me through depression, because I would always hear Lloyd in the back saying, "Your life is valued just by being alive and being there. You will not accomplish anything by dying." And for a game to tell you that must be something very special indeed. So thank you for listening.